Here, I'd like to start the Planning Commission this evening at 6:04. If we could have a roll call, please.
Chairman Cox.
Here.
Vice Chairman Rajaratnam.
Here.
Commissioner Yates.
Here.
Commissioner Sanders.
He is going to be late, but he will be here, so excused.
Commissioner Ferris.
Here.
Lauren, would you lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance, please? All rise.
Please rise, face the flag, hand over your heart, and repeat after me, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You can be seated. Approval of agenda. I requested verification of one line from our recorder, and what did you come up with?
For the agenda.
Yes. Or not the agenda, excuse me. So approval of the agenda. I am sorry. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Chairman Cox.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Rajaratnam.
Aye.
Commissioner Yates.
Aye.
Commissioner Ferris.
Aye.
Okay, item 5, approval of the minutes. That's what I had her check on for us.
Yes. So I'm going to request a correction for a typo. It should say the motion to approve a variance with the condition that the structure be removed when the property is sold and encumbrance be recorded on the property, in addition to correct the resolution to remove the wording that it has a 2-foot setback in the findings.
The only thing I'd add is 2-foot setback should be 5. The easement is a 5-foot easement, and I think that that originally showed 2-foot.
There was an error saying it would be a 2-foot setback rather than a 5-foot setback, so we removed the 2-foot because there is no setback.
Okay. So with that correction, motion?
So moved.
Second.
Chairman Cox.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Rajaratnam.
Aye.
Commissioner Yates.
Aye.
Commissioner Ferris.
Aye.
Number 6, public comment of items not on the agenda. Persons wishing to address the Commission on matters that are within the Commission's jurisdiction and do not already appear on the agenda may do so at this time. Pursuant to Brown Act, the Planning Commission may not take action on an item that does not appear on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. The public comment section of the agenda is limited to a total of 1 hour. Each speaker is asked to provide his or her name and address. We'll open the public comment section now. I see everybody's rushed up to the mic. Going. Gone. We'll close the public comment section and move on to item 7. Continue public hearing SPR 17-02 and TPM 12221 to develop a 4-acre parcel into 5 smaller parcels to be used as general commercial purposes located at 819 South China Lake Boulevard. Staff report.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to point out to the Planning Commission that included in your packet was a modified resolution 1705 to include some new public works conditions. These were presented to us at the very last minute, so we've included them in your package. I believe these are conditions that came from our from our Public Works Department and City Engineer. The other item is we have 2 attached additional maps. These are maps that were submitted by the applicant, and more detail in your packet. Beyond this is not included in the staff report packet you have. These are separate items you should have within your package. And then we also have attached is a CC&R agreement on the property for the maintenance of different common improvements, and that's also included in your package. So we again apologize for the delay on these, but we just got them the last minute and since last Thursday when we sent your packages out. This project has a long and perhaps colored, I don't know how you want to use that word, but basically a long history. This is a project that the Planning Commission has looked at once before and was continued. This is a project that involves, that was also reviewed by and sent to the advisory committee of the City Council for Infrastructure and was discussed there. It has had many conversations with staff and the development team and the developers, civil engineering concerning the parcel. It's been in the process of planning, I would point out now, for almost 4.5, 5 months. It's a very not something that I'm sure that the Planning Commission or the city would like to see more projects fit in that category of taking that long to get through. But it is also a very difficult project in that it is a relatively small project that has a very large burden of public improvements due to its location. And in the staff, you will note, again, just for reference for the general public, this is again a relatively small parcel of 4 acres, I'm sorry, that is being proposed to be transferred into or broken up into 5 smaller parcels. The city code, which is, I think in this case, perhaps something that we need to look at in the future, but requires that a site plan review be done when a parcel map and parcel split is done. This means that we have a site plan, which I believe the developer would tell you or the owner would tell you is also Disneyland. It's fantasy. The site plan is not what they're going to end up building because they do not know what they're going to end up building on those 4 parcels or 5 parcels. As I mentioned in the last meeting, that could greatly change, for example, the parking requirements and the lighting requirements and a lot of other conditional issues associated with the site plan. So you will note in the conditions that are in the planning department that we took the position that they would be required to provide us with, essentially come back to the planning department, and therefore, of course, we come back to you for site plan review, again, when they get to the point where they're actually going to be selling and building on these lots, so that we know whether they're building a restaurant or they're building a hotel or they're building a store or they're building, whatever it is they're building in a commercial development, which affects their parking. And, for example, that I bring up, that's a simple one, but other conditions. So instead of what we like to see eventually, which is that the map would require only the land conditions, the development conditions associated with the land split, rather than the whole package, it does provide you with some, what staff would recommend that you consider the land parcel split and then count and then utilize the condition associated with that planning is put in to as a for the site plan reviews again at a later time, so we don't consider those, and that we have an opportunity to consider what's actually going to be proposed to be built there rather than what's there. This site also finally has some additional actual interesting features in that it's proposing that they have a bridge across the Bowman Wash. The bridge is in your design packet. It is essentially a culvert that meets Caltrans requirements, and but it is a unique thing for us to have a bridge that we look at for the wash for access purposes. So that would be my staff reports, unless you have questions or concerns relative to the package you have in front of you that I can answer. Certainly our engineering department is here, and they can answer your questions relative to the conditions associated with the public works side. And I believe we have the civil engineer for the project here as well, Mr. Darrell Whitten, that probably could answer some of your questions relative to that as well. So with that, I would pass it back to the chairman for activity associated with the project.
Are there commissioner comments?
I just want to make sure I understand what was just said to us. So what we have before is strictly tentative.
The site plan is particularly tentative. In other words, they do not know what's actually going to go on the sites, the five parcels. They have no idea at this point. They're doing a land split so that they can market those parcels or develop those parcels at a later date. So what we're really concerned with at this point, and that's why we put the condition in there, when they get to that point, that they would have to come back to us for site plan review specific to those particular developments that they're doing. But we do have a land parcel split here, which means that some of the public works and engineering conditions do make a difference at this point. You should consider those for certain. It's just, and we can get those up for you. Yeah, I'll get those up on the slide for you. So that's, if I answered your question at all,
Yes.
that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, let me see if I can get
Any
this to
other
work.
commissioner comments?
So at this point, we don't know the size of each parcel, is that right, Mr. Parson?
Yes, I think we do have that. That's, the land splits are there, yes, but not what's going on them.
So I didn't see the size of the parcels anywhere though.
I mean, we do have a site map that shows buildings, but the truth is that that site map is essentially not what's going to be built there.
Is it equal?
And we have, it's a CG site, and if you look at the map, you can see it on the corner of Bowman and China Lake. And this is tentative 12. This is how they propose to split the lot into 5 pieces, this particular map. If you take a look at that, and they have one that's 0.61 acres, another one that grows in, another one that's 0.88 acres, one that's 0.59, I believe, if I can read right, and the other one is a 10-acre site, and finally a 1.38 acre site. So there's 5 different parcels that you see on this map.
Thank you.
Okay, so before I ask the engineer or the developer to come up, I have some concerns I'd like to share with you for your consideration, and they can address some of these. In the resolution under environmental,
Yes.
the general conditions of approval of the site plan review, case SPR 17-2, the conditions are required by the City of Ridgecrest Municipal Code, but are not being specifically requested by this site plan review. Now, that's what is said, okay? Well, I don't know what that means. Some of the other things are, and Gary, you can probably specify that. We're showing here, we're qualifying for a negative declaration, but negative declaration report, which is provided by staff and sent to Sacramento, we should have a copy of that, and we should approve it before it's being sent to Sacramento. And that could be interpreted, but we just we're being asked to vote on negative or approving a negative declaration, but yet we haven't seen that negative declaration. You come down to the Public Works Department. If you've read the staff report, there's a number of places in there. The Engineering Department has reviewed the TMP, application supplementary and preliminary grading and drainage plans. The department review has determined that the TMP and preliminary grading drainage plan are incomplete and do not completely comply with Ridgecrest Municipal Code requirements for tentative parcel map form and content. There's other things that are in there too. So given the statement, why is the project even here at this point? Unless those have been resolved, and maybe staff can tell me that those have been resolved. Public Works conditions refer to the traffic study. A copy of the traffic study should have been included in the Planning Commission's report. We have not seen the traffic study, but it says that one has been done. So there's a number of things here that I have concerns. So whether the developer, the engineer, or staff, can answer some of these questions. I do have other concerns, but in the nature of time, I think that this site, for me, is not ready for approval. In the presentation here, too, and this is a little different. Do we have this slide, Gary?
Yeah, we have it here. That's the site plan site. This one or this one?
You know, either one.
Okay. there's one.
Okay, so it's really hard, Daryl, to see whether or not what the flow is. And part of the conditions that end up getting met on a number of these things is how are each one of these lots being serviced, what the flow is for the traffic, the ingress, regress. In this map here that he has up, it does show the bridge. In my map, it does not, which is part of the packet. So I'd like to give the commission a little bit of history. I'm the only one that's on the commission that was part of the infrastructure that was part of the discussion here. Mr. Whitten came to us with a proposal to put a bridge across the Bowman Channel. There are some major benefits to this. We placed it not necessarily where the city engineer wanted it, but we placed it where we felt that it would do the most good. If you're going north, if you're viewing this road going north, which is to the top of your screen, that lines up with Sanders, which is a dead end coming south. And so this whole subdivision of homes that are sitting off over here in the corner would also be serviced not only by this commercial area, but into the old Walmart or onto Bowman. One of the concessions that the developer and the engineer did is they widened the bridge. And Daryl, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because if I was reading your plat map well enough, we have 40 feet of road, and then we have sidewalk on either side for pedestrian. It's wide enough for bicycle traffic. Is that correct? If I read that correct, it was 40 feet of asphalt. Please.
Yes, sir. That's correct. That's the intent. We're gonna
Okay.
cross the bridge or cross the road with a 40-foot wide. That's a standard local street with the pedestrian access on the sides as well.
So this was, for your information, this was a concession that they made. Originally, they were looking at a narrower bridge. Concession also was that I'm losing the word, but anyway, the tunnel that goes underneath, culvert, if you'll look at the cross section of that, I think it's 9.5 feet clearance, which is big enough for our maintenance department to put a bobcat down and clean debris out, and so on and so forth. And so they were very willing to work with us on that, as well as the improvements, unless that has changed. The other concerns that was not contained in the staff report, maybe to the engineering department can talk to me, because he mentions it in the resolution, is if you look just above the 4-acre split, it is designed for a water retention or a sump. And I'm wondering if an easement has been provided or anything done as far as legal for the design of this road and for this sump area where it's not included in the 4-acre split.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that is one of the conditions that was placed on the project, was to identify easements. And I believe in this last iteration of changes made to the tentative map and the site plan, I believe there are calls for easements. And so I believe we're finding that this latest submittal in the tentative parcel map does comply to that condition.
Okay. At earlier meetings, the staff did indicate that, as was said here, that these are fantasy. Okay, and so they'll have to come back. In the resolution, I'd make a recommendation. We have words coming back to the planning department rather than it says planning commission. And I think we have on landscape, it comes back to the planner, planning department on other conditions. I think some of those need to be modified on the resolution. But can you clarify at all your flow on these 5 lots, how they're getting access? I see the road on the north side off of China Lake Boulevard. And if we approve the split, I assume you're asking us to approve the bridge and the road, but yet that's not what's before us. So I'm kind of wondering where you're, because it talks specifically about the 4 acres and the 5 lots, but it doesn't really talk a lot. The resolution doesn't talk about the bridge and the paving over to Sanders or even the sump. So I'm wondering, do we have any clarity on the flow traffic on the inside of these lots, the width of those roads, things of that nature on this split?
Well, are you going to open up public comments? I suppose.
Well, I can open up public comment, but right now we're having a discussion.
Okay.
And so I'm just asking if you had any information for the commission while we're discussing this. So,
Mr. Cox, this has been the most frustrating project I've ever done in this town. I can't tell you how, well, you'll recall that we went to infrastructure committee just to discuss this bridge. But I've turned in improvement plans to the city engineer to be able to put in a left turn pocket and improvements on China Lake so that I would at least be able to have access. My client wants to start marketing this project, but it's got problems. He wants to be able to show access to Bowman Road because you've got to have that to get commercial developers interested. He's got to show that he's got access off China Lake, both northbound and southbound. The city engineer wouldn't allow us to process improvement plans for that without going through the mapping process. You can't get a map approved in this town unless you also turn in a site plan. That's in the city code. That's not typical throughout Kern County. I can take this project to Kern County Planning Department and they'll process a map without any notion of what I'm going to put on the map. A map is just lines on the ground. They know that I'll come back at a later time when I get a tenant and when I have a prospective development, and I can process a site plan at a later date. Right. That's not allowed in this town. So I have to bring you a site plan that's, you can call it fantasy if you want to. It's a professional product that's intended for use. But I will tell you that it'll change in the future. Once we get an anchor and a few tenants on this project, we'll have to come back and make amendments to it. But it's not a fantasy. It's got the right parking counts for the intended uses. But at this point in time, what my client is trying to accomplish is he wants to be able to put in the public improvements to be able to advance his project and get some tenants involved in this. And I turned this project in around the first of the year. It was supposed to come to Planning Commission in February, but the announcement didn't get put in the paper. It was supposed to come into the Planning Commission in March, but the Planning Commission, the staff wasn't ready with conditions. There were still, things that weren't resolved over what I consider to be kind of pointless things because the number of parking spaces or the drainage on the site, those can easily be worked out in the future when we actually have a site plan that we want to develop.
Because most likely that's all going to change anyways, right? I mean, once you actually have
Once we have the map approved and I can bring the public improvement plans through the engineering department and we can do what we want to do to this site so that we can make it marketable, yeah, probably once we get an anchor or once we have an interested party, they're going to want to move things around. And that's, in my world, that's really when the real engineering starts. But it's taken a long time just to get this in front of you guys. And some of the comments you made about the staff report. If you read the staff report, you can clearly see that there's a little bit of underlying irritation by staff at having to address some of these things. And I've gone back and forth with the city engineer over specific things. I mean, I've turned in a very detailed grading plan on a site plan that everybody knows is going to change, but the city engineer wants me to have all this grading detail. I've got the issues about access. Well, the access is there's going to be a common access agreement. When you finally get an anchor on board and you start working out the CC&Rs, then you'll have a common maintenance agreement, common access agreements. There's a lot of things that will come together in the future. But I had to draft CC&Rs for this project.
Right.
Because that's in the city code too. There's so much arcane stuff in your city code that just doesn't make any sense in the way people develop commercial projects today. And I really can't fault staff, because I think your staff is trying to make an honest effort at complying with the city code. But what I'm trying to get done today, and this is why I would really prefer it if you didn't refer this back to staff and ask them to rewrite the conditions and everything. All I really want to do is get a project approved so that we can improve China Lake Boulevard, so we've got access onto the site. We can start processing plans for this bridge and move the bridge forward so that if my client wants to build it, he knows he's got a set of plans he can go out to bid with. And when it comes to the site improvements, when we get an anchor and we know who's going to be renting some of these parcels, then we'll come back with an amended site plan, and we'll probably have to redraw the map. But even if you approve the map today, that at least moves us one step further down the road, so that when we're ready to move ahead with improvement on one of these sites, we already know what the conditions are going to be and what's necessary to get the map approved. So, okay, my rant's over.
Well, and I appreciate that. It's one of the reasons why I talked about the bridge and some of the things that you've gone through. I think for me personally, some of the frustrations where I'm at is to approve a site plan and a division at the same time, because the division, to divide it and then say, well, we're maybe going to put this here and this here and this here, and we can't see flow of traffic, we can't see a number of things, creates a question: are we approving something that we don't know what's going to finally be there? And that's not where I want to go. I personally don't have a problem with the division. I can't really see how you have access to each and every lot, and that's why I ask that. And because the 4 acres and the division of the 5 lots, doesn't really talk a lot about the area north or west of it. It does. The engineer has come back and he has talked about the road and the sump and so on and so forth. And I know that that's just extra stuff for you. So for me personally, I don't have a problem with the split. I don't have a problem with the bridge and the improvements. And it's how we get there. But I do have a tough time with approving a whole package when all the information isn't there. It's not to make you jump through additional hoops. Well, I do know that the owner of the property has been talked to by others and is very willing to work with the city. And I think that that's where we are as a commission too. But I think the resolution as written, we can modify it. But as written, I have a hard time with. So unless, and that's just my personal opinion. Is there anything that the engineer would like to share in relationship to this? And before he speaks, Darrell, I understand what you're saying when you say it's hard, but our city staff and engineer are also required to follow the municipal code. And if that needs to be updated, it needs to be updated, and we need to do that process. But until it is, then all they can do is present the facts to us, and you come to us, and we can make a decision to, or in infrastructure as we did, change, bend, alter, and come to a compromise, which we did in infrastructure, as you remember. And that's where you get relief or recourse to kind of come along in the process. And so I just would like the commission to have full information so that they can decide, well, on a resolution, I would like to see this, and that's what I can approve, but I can't approve this portion of it. And they have the capability of doing that to move your project along. So Lauren?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, this project has quite a few moving parts to it. There's quite a bit of off-site improvements that are necessary here, and it's at a major intersection of two arterials with a major drainage unit, hydrologic unit that runs through the property or adjacent to it. And, our municipal code requires a submittal to allow staff to adequately and accurately condition the project. And cities are a little different than the county. Cities, we have higher densities, we have higher volumes of traffic. There's a lot more to be considered in a city environment for conditioning projects than in the county. We have to make sure that we are protecting the general public's health, safety, and welfare, and that requires information. And if we did not go through and ask for this information, there would be many unanswered questions and ambiguities, and I'm sure that expectations for how the project would develop would not be met. One important aspect that the Commission needs to realize here also, in the circulation and the improvements that would be installed, is the Subdivision Map Act does allow parcel maps to not put in the improvements prior to the final map approval, which means that you could go ahead and have this map approved, and the very first project, or the way the Subdivision Map Act reads, upon the first permit issued for a development is when some of the improvements may be installed. Now, I guarantee you that first tenant is not going to want to construct all these improvements. Therefore, I would imagine you as commissioners probably have an expectation that these improvements are going to show up as soon as we ask for the final map. And that's not the case. The MAP Act actually allows the improvements to be deferred until the very first tenant or very first builder applies for a permit, and that's when improvements are required. Now, that first guy in there is not going to want to build all these improvements. So one of the things that I had asked for in the conditions of approval, which I think is applicable and consistent with what we've done with other commercial developments, is ask for a development agreement that clearly identifies how we're going to play the game, clearly identifies what your expectations or clarifies the expectations for the development of the improvements for the site. That would include the bonding, any bonding that is going to be necessary, when the improvements would be constructed. If it's going to be phased, you'd have a clear understanding of phasing of those improvements. But as is, the developer is wanting to construct a left-hand turn pocket on China Lake Boulevard and then put up a barricade and let it sit there. And all for the purpose for trying to develop land sales. Now, that's okay, but what are your expectations? As the engineer, I'm approving a turn pocket to nowhere for a barricade to sit there for how long? What are your expectations? That's the purpose of development agreements, is to define how a project's going to be constructed, a sense of timing and phasing and when things are going to occur. Like I said, this project has a great amount of off-site improvements. And I'm sure you have expectations on when those are going to be constructed. And this parcel map process allows a developer to defer those until such time as the first permit is drawn. So, this isn't as simple as what would be expressed. There's complexities here. And so as staff, we try to illuminate those, try to condition them so that the city isn't left with expectations that haven't been met, as well as protecting the public's interest in health, safety, and welfare.
Questions of the commission?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Sanders.
So am I to understand the developer is expecting to make these improvements before the rest of the parcels are developed? Is that what you want to, is that what you're trying to accomplish?
At this point in time, I just want to be able to turn in engineering plans, have them checked by the engineering department and approved for construction. I don't think the developer's foolish enough to put in $400,000 or $500,000 worth of improvements until he's got a tenant and is ready to move forward. But he can't do that unless he's at least gone through the plan check process, and the city engineer won't check the plans unless I go through this process.
Unless there's a,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, I'm just trying to, this is very complicated. I think maybe it's not as complicated as it needs to be. But I'm just trying to wrap my mind around what exactly the developer wants and what staff is asking for. So I think I understand now. It sounds almost like maybe we need to have a discussion on another day about whether or not this is an appropriate part of the municipal code that needs to stay, whether to require a full site plan to get a map approved.
Well, I think that they've conditioned it. If you look at the resolution, they've conditioned it in a fashion that they need to comply with these things. We can also go and approve the subdivision on its own, and with the conditions pertaining to it, and allow them to move forward. I want to make sure that the city is protected, but I also am very sensitive to the developer wanting to be able to move forward, because they're certainly not going to do anything. Now, if you listen to Mr. Whitten and Mr. Culp, they talk about that left-hand turn. Well, one of the conditions is it's a right turn in and a right turn out on China Lake Boulevard.
Yep.
And then that they have to create a turn pocket for a left turn in on the northbound traffic.
Yeah.
Okay, but not a left out. It's only left in, correct? Because that's how I read it.
Yes, sir, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, but then on the Bowman side, it's right turn out and left turn in and right turn in. Correct?
Yes, that's correct. There would be a protected left-hand turn pocket which would allow access off of Bowman Road into the development.
Okay, so they meet the conditions of most developments. The fire department really likes to have two accesses, and so they meet that under those conditions. Trying to approve the other portion of the resolution, other than just the subdivision, without seeing the other conditions such as flow and other things, as Mr. Whitten says, that's going to come when they actually have a tenant. I am concerned on the subdivision size. If you get a tenant that needs two of them, or one of them, if we're going to come back for a line adjustment or something like that. But I would like to see, I'm not hearing anything from staff that is saying we couldn't move through, at least with the subdivision, and change the resolution reflecting only the subdivision for the approval. if these conditions are met. So that would include if the approval or condition of the China Lake Boulevard access, the Bowman access, bridge improvements to Sanders, those kinds of things that would benefit the surrounding property as well, the property to the west, the property to the east, which is the one that we're talking about. And so we can have the resolution changed to reflect only the subdivision and move forward. And then each subsequent parcel can come back to us for approval in that subdivision.
And that's where all the incomplete
Yes.
parts of this would be identified.
Yes.
At that time.
Most
I would be
most
fine
of my
with that.
frustration lies right there.
Yeah,
And
me
so we're
too.
taking this bite, and I'm just recommending maybe this bite.
Right.
Do we needed to, for those sections, do we needed to come back before us or the actual planning department?
Well, I want it to come back and specify planning department, or planning commission, whether it's landscaping or it's flow or building or
That makes
on-site
sense,
water retention or whatever it is, because the approval of this, if we just take this as a whole, my perspective, this is a big thing, because that would cost a lot of money to put those improvements in. And he's right, they're not going to spend it unless they've got, Applebee's or somebody else that wants to come in and maybe get started. But the ability to go out and market it is access.
Mm-hmm.
And so
we approve the parts that have the access, and then each individual part will come back to us.
well, it's
at a later date.
marketable at that point, and these improvements, if met as provided by the city engineer, and I understand they're harsh or hard in some instances, but as close as that is to the stoplight there at the old Walmart, and that to start backing up traffic either northbound or southbound is a concern. When we considered that when we talked about the bridge and infrastructure, both westbound and eastbound, and what that would do on the long run. The original master plan showed a completely different road than what we're putting in here now. And so there was a compromise. The city wanted this, and we came down to this. I'm sure the developer would like it much smaller, but there was a compromise. So, staff?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, anything that comes to the planning commission comes through the planning department, and then we move it to you. So what I'm hearing, you're asking staff to direct specifically that this, and we wouldn't do it anyway. It would be a planning commission issue. We'd bring the council, we'd bring the planning commission. We will do that. So, I understand your language issue, but we don't. The planning commission doesn't take applications or anything else. It's the planning department that does. That's why we use that, and that's the language in the municipal code. But we certainly will make sure this gets to you, since you're so actively involved in this one. And frankly, it's a lot better for you to take on the responsibility for approval instead of the staff person taking on the responsibility for the approval. The other thing is, you mentioned the negative deck. Historically, in the last 10 years or 5 years or 10 years that I've looked at it, I'm sorry, I mean the last 7 years that we looked at it, when we looked into the negative deck, we've never presented the physical negative deck declaration to the planning commission, or in fact the check sheet that goes to the state. So if that's something you'd like to see in the future, we can make that change going forward. And be happy to do that, but we just haven't done that as a practical method, as a practical process in the past. So that's why it's not included in this one. But we can certainly do that in the future if you choose to want to do that. To see those, the declaration is very, very simple.
Right.
It's a 2-sentence word and a thing, and the check sheet is exactly the same check sheet. You're just going through and identifying. I might point out also, this is obviously a disturbed parcel and there really wasn't a huge environmental impact associated with animals and that kind of thing associated with this particular lot. Other lots we require a biota, despite what sometimes they say, well, wait a minute, but do we like to have a biota for animal purposes? So it depends on the project whether we order a biota or not. But we do the do that. And we'll be, like I said, we'd be happy to bring it to you as part of the package in the future if you want to do that.
I just think when we declare that, we're going to make this a negative declaration, that we ought to be able to see and say, okay, we've read it, it's part of the report. Mr. Whitten, one more question for you for the commission. Is the road that you have indicated here on the north side, is it considered public or private?
Just for the record, I hope you're going to open up public comments so I can make my case for the project. But yes, it's going to be a public road.
Okay. Well, the only reason I ask that, just for the commission standpoint, is Alta One owns the property to the north of it, and I didn't want to create a project or benefit a project that does the same kind of problem that we've got with Fallgetter and Walmart, where they don't have that common access, because it's to the benefit of this development as well as the next development that they have access to each other for customers and customer base. So I'm glad to know that that's a public road, not a private road. So is there any other questions from the
I
commission?
have one question, one clarification rather. Public Works says preliminary grading and drainage plans are incomplete. So how far are we off? Is it minor changes we need, or is it something major that we are expecting?
Well, ask it this way. Will it affect the subdivision?
Yeah.
Or does it pertain to other things?
Well, all the elements are shown within the. I was able to look at this latest submittal here and identify some things that had not been identified in prior submittals. So I would say, Commissioner, that the applicant's engineer has satisfied the requirements for giving enough information such that I can adequately and accurately condition the project for grading as well as drainage.
Okay, thank you, sir. That helps.
Any other questions? Okay, public? Turn it over to public.
Mr. Chairman, Darrell Whitten with Cornerstone Engineering again. I appreciate your comments about not wanting to approve the site plan. However, we put a lot of work into that site plan. And the project has been conditioned as a package. Yeah, let's go through some of the slides. We do have a preliminary grading plan that we've turned in. We've got preliminary utility plans. Is the grading plan a part of the staff report?
Yes. I think it is.
I mean, there's the detail I think you were looking for with regard to the circulation within the project. Typically on a commercial project like this, you'll have lots, individual lots, but then you'll have internal common areas and CC&Rs so that the parking is shared, the access is shared. So even though the underlying map you may look at the underlying map and say, oh, this lot over here is landlocked. It has no access to anywhere. But in fact, the lots, when the full package is developed, you've got an integrated commercial development where you've got common access that's maintained by a common entity. Usually these type of developments, they don't set up HOAs, but they'll set up their own maintenance organization that provides for the common maintenance of the parking areas, the infrastructure, that sort of thing. I would like you to approve the site plan along with the parcel map. Now, the site plan under the code, the site plan is only good, the approval of the site plan is only good for 12 months. So if the project doesn't develop in 12 months, you really haven't risked anything. But the map will be approved for 3 years, or I believe it's 24 months with the possibility of additional extensions. And what will typically happen on a project like this is the anchor will come in or we'll get some interest on the project. And then we come back in with an amended site plan and an amended map. And at that point, the city engineer can, and the planning department can choose to bring the amended package back to the planning department if it's major. But if it's a minor amendment and we've only moved a couple of buildings or changed a few minor items, then at the staff level they can deal with that, since the project's already conditioned to address those issues. I think the conditions that have been put together by staff are comprehensive. They adequately address the moving parts. I know Lauren mentioned something about a development agreement. He and I have a profound difference of opinion over what development agreements are for. In the city code, the development agreement is a part of the zoning ordinance. And if you read the section on it, to me, what it's meant to address is planned unit developments or type of zoning situations that are outside the box of your normal zoning ordinance. And so it allows for customized zoning, so to speak. And there are certain developments, such as a very large big box development like what Walmart did, where they're going to spend millions of dollars. They'll come in and put together a development agreement that specifically addresses certain, we'll do this if the city puts up the money to do that. And when they get into cost sharing and Mello-Roos bonding, things like that, then you've got to have some kind of agreement. But this is a pretty common commercial development, and I don't see the need for a development between the developer and the city. And also in the city code, a development agreement is usually initiated by the applicant, not by staff. And the way the code's written, the applicant has to apply to the city to want to do a development agreement. And so far, my owner has no interest in doing a development agreement. I would say that we've tried to address all the concerns of the city engineer. The conditions of approval for the map and the site plan are well thought out, and we don't have any issue with them. And I'd like you to approve the project as it's conditioned by the staff report. We don't intend to come in and try and file a map with the city before we do the improvements and meet all the conditions of the that are in the project now. So even though the MAP Act does give that option, I don't think that's the way this project is being approved. And so we would ask you to approve the project and the site plan as conditioned by the city engineer and recommended by staff. And we hope to get the project moving, and hopefully in a year or two we will have an anchor or some interest in developing one or two of these lots. We'll bring back an amended site plan and an amended map, and it'll either come back to the Planning Commission or it may just go back to staff. I think if you condition it to come back to Planning Commission, I don't have a problem with that. But at least this moves us forward with a complete package, and we can start working with city engineer to develop the plans for the infrastructure to support this project. And then when we get a more permanent situation, we'll bring it back to you, or however you wish. But I would like to have the entire package approved, not piecemeal, if you please.
Mr. Whitten, can I ask a question?
Yeah, we'll try to start that one. Let me ask you a question. Since you're indicating that the site plan is something you'd like to have approved, given the fact that you do not have uses on these buildings, if all these buildings were a restaurant and they were all one parking space for 75, you accounted for 75 square feet. You've accounted for that?
Well, we've designed some of these to be restaurants. They're kind of obvious, and they're designed to match the city code for that. There's 2 buildings that are intended to be retail. 3 of them are intended to be restaurants. So we set it up like that. But if we come back and that big building turns out to be a restaurant, then yeah, it's all got to be rethought.
Because that was why I assumed that was the case, because I'm just using parking as an example, is that the uses of these buildings can vary dramatically, the conditions that are required.
Exactly.
So I'm just concerned, and what I see happening, we see this in some of our other shopping centers. We've seen this before, where we have a change in use. A store goes out of business and another store comes in. The one store is a retail store. The next one that comes in is a restaurant. And they're saying, well, it's all common parking. It's all common parking. Well, you change the tenor of the project. When I start looking at it, I go, do I have enough parking spaces throughout the development to support that new restaurant? So I'm just concerned that that's why we put the condition in there that says when you come back with the actuals, we have the opportunity to recondition the site plan or recondition the site plan offered at that time. I'm just concerned that when, that's my comment relative to somewhat fantasy, because you don't know exactly what these buildings are going to end up being. But that was my question, just to see whether you had actually accounted for enough parking spaces at 1 per 75 for the square footage.
Okay, so the other question that I would have you read the resolution?
Yes, sir, I have.
The conditions of?
The conditions of approval?
Yes.
Yes.
That there's some shortcomings, inadequacies, that those will have to be met?
Well, the conditions of approval were written, I've already submitted revised grading plans, revised drainage plans. I've addressed all the comments that the city engineer, I don't think he got around to rewriting the conditions. But I think that we've adequately addressed all the drainage, all the access issues.
Well, that's okay. I mean, if he puts in that this is incomplete and you complete it, you've still met the conditions that are needed.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm asking, because if I ask staff, you've got your conditions in there, okay? And you've got your conditions in there, and I recommend approval to the commission, and I sign the document. Are you okay with the conditions that are in there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Lauren, the conditions that you have concern over are in this document.
Yes, and Mr. Witten is correct that we have gone through several iterations of submittals to satisfy staff's concerns for being able to adequately and accurately condition the project. And there are some of these that have been satisfied, which I can point out to you. Staff had asked for, the municipal code asked for CC&Rs on the project. So if you turn to last section 8 on page 17, tract map requirements, the CC&Rs have been satisfied.
Yes.
So 8A has been satisfied.
That was the supplement that was sent to the commission.
Yes. And they have, there was yet another iteration that was made on that. The municipal code requires that if you have any private drives, that you also have in your CC&Rs a mechanism for maintenance of those common areas or those common driveways. And in review of the latest submittal of the CC&Rs, there are provisions in there whereby each property owner is required to share in the expense of maintaining common driveways. 8B is still conditioned in there that I'd wish the commission to consider yet for the development agreement.
What page?
That's 17.
8B.
Yes, that's the development agreement. And again, the issue there is that we've heard the engineer indicate that it is the desire to try to construct those improvements prior to or at some time in advance of the total development or the tenant moving in, but you still have nothing in writing here that commits or gives you a clear understanding of when those improvements would be installed, when bonds would be posted, when the actual improvements would be constructed.
Well, can we, rather than requiring that development agreement, can we not give a time limit by which to, so that they can market it, they can come up with possible, give them 12 months or 18 months or something like that, and at that point, because they're not going to get a permit to proceed with that one.
Well, the way land divisions can be handled is to, if they want to final their map and be able to market or be able to enjoy land sale, speculation of land sale, a bond can be posted for the improvements, and that allows the map to be filed, and then the project that you have real property in which you can then market upon that time. But the improvements must be constructed in whole and not in part. And so staff would, if you're uncomfortable with the development agreement, defining the terms for a parcel map type of development, which could be a phased or piecemeal construction of those improvements. If we went to a more typical subdivision posting of bond prior to the final map, and then having the construction of those improvements constructed in whole, that would be a commitment, a firm commitment for those improvements.
Excuse me, but what condition, there's a condition that says something about a development agreement?
Yeah, Darrell, it's 8B
Okay.
on page 17.
Looking at the same
That's-
thing.
I-
8B says design and construct water facilities.
Yeah, we don't have those conditions.
No, 8B, enter into development, that's on page 17, it's on the back side.
Well, I got conditions from Heather beginning of this week, and my condition says design and construct water facilities per Indian Wells Valley
That's what I'm reading.
requirements.
It's the old one.
What is this?
All right, that concerns me, because that's why I said, you have seen this resolution.
I don't know that I've seen.
Well,
Here's-
evidently I haven't seen that resolution.
Here's where I'm going to go with that too for the commission. If you turn to page 11
On which one?
on the
Okay,
resolution.
this one or this one?
The new one.
The new one.
The one is
Okay.
not part of your packet.
Okay, and I'm going to give Mr. Whitten my copy, and he can digest it, and we can defer this for 5 minutes or so you can look through it and see if there's a difference. But it says here in Section 8, conditional approval. If you look there, the below conditions have been satisfied by, and we can put 18 months or whatever it is, so that he can actually market. He's not going to bond to put improvements. He's not going to put the improvements in if he can't market this. And so if we put conditions in there by which he's got to actually lay out $500,000 before he can even market it, or other things, I'm not sure that that's beneficial, because it talks in here they have to have a detailed traffic study and so on and so forth. And so I want to make sure that from Mr. Whitten's point of view and our engineer's point of view and our developer, that they're happy with these conditions and we can be met in 18 months. If they can meet those conditions, that satisfies the engineering department, that satisfies planning, and that gives them time to market and see if there's interest, whether or not they can pursue the development of this piece of property. So I would
Commissioner,
yes.
the municipal code does require posting improvement securities for construction of on-site and off-site facilities. That's item 8C, and those are the municipal code sections which require
What page are you
on 17. And that is 8C, which is directly out of the municipal code for parcel maps.
Well, that still would be assuming that the project goes forward. If we give them 18 months and they're moving forward, then they could post the bond, could they not, and satisfy that?
Well, the question is their ability to, on speculation of land sales, generally the map is recorded and it becomes real property in which they can market it or enter into a sales agreement for the property. Now, there are other agreements that can be entered into by a landowner and a potential client or commercial usage, but for entering into conditions of land sale, usually you have to have a final map, something that's real property. You don't have real property until you have a final map recorded.
Okay. So what is your recommendation?
The recommendation would be to, staff still maintains that there needs to be a firm commitment when the improvements would be constructed and that they are constructed in total rather than the provisions made by the Subdivision Map Act. I think it's important that this site function with the improvements that are called for. And so staff would recommend that we require the developer to post those bonds per the municipal code. The map could be recorded then. He could then go out for speculation of land sale. He would have real property. But we would have the improvement security to hold to ensure that the improvements are constructed in whole and not in part. There wouldn't be any phasing of the development. That what it ensures is that the first guy in is not going to come in here knocking on your door, bucking and snorting, saying, "I've got to put all these improvements in. I can only afford to put in my little piece of the pie." What you're afforded is that all the improvements would be constructed, and you wouldn't have one builder then coming in saying, "I can't construct all of this. I have to only construct that, which is a portion of my project."
Lauren, would that not be a requirement for the final map?
Yes.
Not the tentative?
Yes. You post the improvement securities and of course, you do your improvement plans, have your improvement plans, your grading plan, everything approved with a improvement security for those improvements, and then the map may be final. And he has real property in which he can then market and enter into sales contracts for. And then you're ensured that you are holding the securities to ensure that those improvements will be constructed.
Mr. Whitten, you are the developer. Be willing to bond this project given a time frame, an 18-month time frame?
Well, I understand what Mr. Culp has explained. It. The way these projects work, bonding is extremely expensive. In 2008, 2009, all the bonding companies went belly up, and the bonds were worthless. And so today, if you want to bond for a map, you better be ready to build everything pretty quick because the bonds are going to cost you a fortune. And so typically on a development like this, the developer is going to line up a few tenants. He's going to get people under contract. He's going to have everything ready to execute and move. So we would have all the improvement plans in place. The mechanism would happen just the way Lauren describes it, except that the bonding's not going to happen so that we can go out and speculatively market the map. That's not the way it works. We get the map approved, we get the site plan approved, we turn in the improvement plans to the city, we get things ready to go, and then when the developer finds a couple of prospects and enters into contracts with them, then we bond, we record the map, and we get our butts in gear to get everything built so that we can get the thing closed out and get the bonds released. Because the bonds cost a lot, especially on something like this. And so we would have, now, we would have to bond for all the off-site or the public improvements. I don't see us, this is a private development. I don't see why we would bond for anything within the tract. Those are private improvements that have to come. But certainly, nobody's going to get occupancy in any of these buildings unless all the public improvements are complete and in place. So I don't have a problem with the whole process you're talking about, which includes bonds. That's pretty typical for a project like this.
Well, I think that we can do the tentative because it's not the final map. And I'm questioning whether or not Public Works has a major problem on approving the tentative under this resolution and not the final until they do their work. Lauren?
Yes, Commissioner, I have conditioned this to protect the city's interest in ensuring that the city's secured for the improvements that are called for. And so if the commission does so approve this project with the conditions at hand, staff feels confident that we have protected the public's interest and that we would not have to worry about having something occur or having to be deficient in the improvements that are required.
So,
Thank you.
Lauren, the way this is written, when are these bonds required? At the before the final map is recorded?
Yeah. Mr. Whitten and I are really speaking the same language.
Okay.
It's, in the land division process, when you're ready to file your final map, that's when you post you first of all get your improvement plans approved, and then when you're ready to final your map, you post your bonds, and away you go.
Right.
So that, we're singing the same tune.
Any other public comment?
Can I have 5 minutes to review these conditions?
Yes, we can actually
Take a recess.
bring it back, continue on. We'll listen to.
We could temporarily continue this until we have another item. We can go to our, I believe, next on
Abatement?
abatement, and after the abatement, we'd call you back, Darrell, on this,
Thank you. So moving
if the commission
forward,
so chooses.
that's my recommendation. Is that okay with the commission? Okay, so let's move on to take no action, and we'll move on to number 8, public hearing abatement, public hearing pursuant the RMC 4-15-104 property located at 505 South Helena Street, APN number 480-03006. Staff report.
Yeah, this is in regards to 505 South Helena Street, APN 480-03006. Property owner is Sandra J. Franks, 508 Smith Street, Cottonwood, Idaho, 83522. Guess we got to get back to where I'm at. There we go.
I kept pulling him back, so I apologize. Wanted to make sure that the history was known by all commissioners.
The Ridgecrest Municipal Code ordinance violations, 415-101A7, B1 and 3, and C1 and 3. A7, substandard building conditions described in the state housing law, including but not limited to section 17920.3 of the Health and Safety Code. B1, an unoccupied and unsecured building or structure. B3, damaged or partially destroyed building or structure not removed or repaired within 120 days after the damage or destruction, or if the removal or repair cannot reasonably be accomplished within 120 days, have not been commenced within such period and prosecuted diligently toward completion. C1, accumulation of debris, junk, garbage, or refuse. C3, trees, weeds, and other vegetation which are dead, decayed, infested, diseased, or overgrown. During the evening of August 8, 2016, a fire occurred at 505 South Elena Street, Ridgecrest, reportedly due to a faulty propane tank used for the residents' barbecue. On August 9th, I responded to the address, and due to the extensive damage, the structure was red tagged as unsafe for human occupancy. The resident of the property, William J. Groves, was at that location. I explained to him why I was red tagging the property and that an authorization to enter letter would be provided to him in order for him and our property owner to secure the property and make all repairs necessary to bring the structure up to code. Mr. Groves added that they had no insurance on the building, therefore the cleanup will take some time. Initial inspection of the property indicated the residents of the property were hoarders, which contributed to the excessive fire damage. It was also learned that Mr. Groves' wife, Melody Groves, was the daughter of the property owner. Up until December 2016, the cleanup attempt was slow but consistent. During December, it was noted that all work had ceased. However, it was learned that the property owner was considering selling the property to a local realtor who planned to clean up the property and refurbish the structure. February 2017, the notice of pre-abatement public hearing to abate property letter was mailed to the property owner, advising that if she failed to abate the property, the case would be heard before the Planning Commission March 28th. In early March 2017, it was learned that Williams and Melody Groves had walked away from the property. In addition, the local realtor advised the property owner had agreed to sell the property to her and a proposal for the sale mailed to the property owner for her signature. As the sale was possible, the Planning Commission presentation was placed on hold pending the sale. On March 27th, the realtor advised the proposal mailed to the property owner had expired and the property owner had blocked her telephone number and has refused to respond to her inquiries. As such, another letter was mailed to the property owner on that particular date, advising her the Planning Commission presentation was rescheduled for April 25th, 2017. A review of the Kern County Tax Assessor website revealed $1,692.70 is owed in property taxes, which is just this year's. Order of abatement to be conducted by the property owner. A complete removal of all trash, junk, and debris from the entire property, front, side, and backyards, and to repair, secure, and/or board up all broken windows and doors to ensure no access by unauthorized personnel, and all grass, weeds to be cut to ground level to reduce the risk of fire. That the abatement to be conducted will be completed or notification obtained by the code enforcement officer that services of a contractor have been obtained and verified to do the abatement no later than May 12, 2017.
Questions of commission or from the commission for staff? The last taxes paid, these are 2 years old, correct? I'm showing that the amount due is $1692.70, and as of December 16, it was $841. So I'm assuming that it's 2 years out.
Actually, it was $1,600 is what it was per year. So
Okay.
she hasn't paid the last
Just 1 year.
this year's. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I do have one question, if I
Yes.
May I ask one question?
Mr. Sanders.
may. It's been a little while since I've been through this. Could you refresh, what is the process from this point on? Right now, today, you're asking for an order of abatement from
Yes,
the...
sir. Basically, what happens after that, once I get the signed resolution, I send a letter to the property owner, and since she's out of state, I'll send it priority mail, letting her know that she has to abate the property by this particular date or get a contractor employed to do it. If I do not hear from her by that date, then I will go out for bids and get a contractor to do it. Once he's finished with it, his cost, my cost, all that goes into a bill sent to her. If she doesn't pay it within 10 days, then I put a lien on it, and then I do a special assessment on the property tax, so the city will get their money eventually.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
And the owner has not been responsive to you?
No, sir.
Okay, and we're knowing that our notifications are getting to the right place?
Oh, they are.
Or is it just they're showing up and just not coming back?
No, I sent them priority mail. It is delivered to her mailbox.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Any public comment? Proposal? Do I have a,
I'll motion approval of the order of abatement.
second? So, aye.
Vice Chairman Rajaratnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Yates,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanders,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferris.
Heather, resolution 17-.
08.
Thank you, Mr. Booth.
And one quick one. Last January, you approved a resolution to abate 215 West Panamint. I was able to dig up who was purchasing the property, and I convinced him, since the Planning Commission gave me authority to abate it, to have him clean it up.
Wow. Good job.
He is currently putting in new windows, refurbishing the whole thing. Apparently he lives in Nevada, but he works in Trona, so this is going to be his place to reside when he's working here in town. So it did cost us a dime, and we got it
Thank you,
fixed.
thank you. Thank you for that follow-up. All right, Mr. Whitten isn't back. We will move on to public hearing. Are you ready for us? Yes. Would you come to the mic? We will return to public hearing SP 17-02 and the TPM 12221. Mr. Whitten is at the mic. And so the question was given to you that the resolution is written. Are you okay with the conditions that are in it?
And my answer is no. I would like to make some changes to the conditions.
Let's look at it.
Possible. Okay, condition,
What page?
let's see. Let's start with condition A. So this would be condition AL, which is at the top of page 15. This condition says design and construct all on-site and off-site private roadways to meet City of Ridgecrest. I guess this condition is, I want to say, redundant, or any on-site and off-site private roadways. I guess I'm concerned about the off-site roadways have to be constructed prior to recording of the map. On-site, I don't think that would be the case. But if this is just a standard, this is just saying everything shall meet the Ridgecrest City standard, then it's a redundant condition, because everything already has to meet the Ridgecrest City standards. That's why the standards are there. So,
Mr. Culp?
Yes, Commissioner, the condition was written per the municipal code sections for both private as well as public roadways. that requires private roadways to also comply to the city standard. And the concern was, if you look at the cross sections and if you look at the tentative map, there's a private, it's declared as a private drive, and it's further called a private drive aisle, in which there's only, it appears to be 28 feet of surface area for traveled way. And staff wanted to make sure that the commission was aware that there is this private driveway and the fact that the municipal code requires those private roads to comply to the city standards for.
You're talking about the one on the south side
That's correct.
that goes over to the Sanders connection or the bridge.
That's correct. And might point out that that would be a private access that would be utilized by those parcels along the south boundary there for parcel 4 and parcel 5 access that would rely upon that for their physical access from a private drive. If you look at parcels 3, 2, and 1, they have direct access to what is proposed as a public right-of-way, the north side street. The very southerly parcels 4 and 5. 4 does have a flag lot, I should say. 4 does have a flag lot that does connect to the proposed public right-of-way on that north side. But parcel 5 relies in total upon the private driveway, or aisle as it's called, for their physical access.
I don't see it that way, because through the parking lots, the conjoined parking lots, they have access to that public road.
True, and that is also the concern there as well, as that the common areas of driveways and parking lots do qualify as the both physical and legal access to those parcels.
Mr. Whitten, what is the developer thinking when he looks at the private road? Is that for loading, unloading? Is that to relieve congestion from the north road that you're putting in that's a public road? What was the thought there?
Well, it's a driveway.
Right.
It's a driveway access over to the public road. You could call it a private drive, but as it so happens, my client owns the property to the west.
Right.
So he would grant himself access. But the reason it's only 28 feet wide is because it's not considered to be a public street, and it shouldn't have to be designed to public street standards. But it gives you better circulation within the project. So it makes it easy for somebody to enter the site from the south. And if somebody wants to leave and go out to the bridge, they don't have to go north and get on the street and then circulate around to the south.
What is the width of that?
It's 2 14-foot wide lanes, so it would be 28 feet
Okay,
wide.
so the standard 2-lane road is 12 foot per lane, so it exceeds the standard 12 foot. So I read that condition, and yeah, it is redundant other than, to the standards. And Mr. Culp, you might clarify that for me, as the standards would be compaction, road base, depth of asphalt, those kinds of things, because if it exceeds 12 foot, he's automatically meeting the conditions, even though you're putting these conditions in.
Well, the city standards, design standards, do not have a roadway section of 28 feet. So it does not meet the standards for a roadway in width. Certainly, design standards for the base section and asphalt and the curbs and gutters would be the city standards, but there are no standards for a 28-foot wide street section. And I might also mention there's no walkways there either.
Well, I guess my concern in that is the fact, if we looked at Walmart, for example, and they have the drive-through for the pharmacy, and there's a certain width there. It's an access. It's not a city road that has to have curb, gutter, sidewalk, paving, so on and so forth. And so he's creating a private access way for either loading, unloading, or even a relief of additional traffic. I'm thinking he's met the requirements. Because it's not public. It's not a public road. It's considered private. And so some of that would be mitigated. Is that not correct?
Well, the municipal code is quite clear that the private roadways are required to meet those standards. And if the commission would so desire to make that recommendation to the city council to allow a roadway section of 28 feet for that private access, that would be what I would consider a recommendation.
I would be fine with that. Commission, questions?
So is it, but you said earlier it's already exceeding the standard. Is that correct?
The standard width, but our engineer is correct because there's no curb, gutter, and sidewalk. It's not like a city street.
Right.
Okay. So your lane, each lane is 12 feet. And so it's a private access, and I think that's probably why they listed it, because if you look at the roadway on the north side, that's designed completely different.
Yeah. No, I understand that.
And so that can be relief from the development, but it can also be used because it's private for loading and unloading, because it's not considered for traffic flow. If they have a semi sitting there and they're unloading, it's a private entrance.
So are we going to change this then?
We would change this
to not include the private roadways.
How do you want that
Design
worded,
and construct
Lauren?
all on and off-site roadway. No.
Well, the reality is that is a traveled way, and it is going to be utilized in common for all parcels. And and by it not being public, it is certainly going to be private. And there are conditions in the CC&Rs which require each of the owners to maintain, and they speak to private roadways or common areas.
Right.
So the
But that's
condition would
addressed in the
still
CC&Rs, correct?
have to be that it'd have to comply to a city's public street standard. So,
But should they have to build curb, gutter, and sidewalk there, though? I mean, that doesn't make any
the
sense.
city's standards call for curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and a standard street section, yes.
Well, I'm having a hard time with that, Lauren, because if you look at this map, half of that is adjacent to the parking lot. It's just part of the parking lot.
Yeah.
You know, if you ended up with a curb on the south side as the end result of the drive, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that. But it corners every other subdivision and has if you look at what parcel is it that's heading west next to the sump? That has a drive-through showing through there, and it has a barrier on that road. Parcel 4. Okay, go back for me. That has a barrier. So if you have a barrier on both sides, is there any reason to accommodate on a private drive a sidewalk for pedestrian traffic when this meets all the requirements for two-lane or two-direction flow?
Well, the issue at hand is that the city's standard sections, this section simply doesn't comply, and honestly, staff doesn't have that discretion to waive a city standard.
Oh, we're not asking you to. We're wanting to waive it, and yes, in the CC&Rs, they're going to have to maintain it. I just want to know what the wording should be on L.
for us to waive the private road?
Because the consensus that I'm hearing from the commission is to waive it, and yes, in the CCRs, they're going to maintain it. I understand the staff can't do that, but do the CCNRs cover that, so I can just waive L altogether if that's what the commission wants?
Well, I don't believe the commission has the authority to waive a requirement that's established by ordinance. The city's design standards are established by ordinance and approved by city council. And I think the commission, I think the appropriate action would be for the commission to make some recommendation to the city council to have them approve this non-standard driveway, that it doesn't comply to the city standards, and therefore the council would be authorized to allow something other than what's been approved by ordinance.
Okay, because and I know where I want to go with this, but because it says the subdivider shall prepare, if we go down, design and construct all on-site and off-site private roadways to meet city public street standards. This is a private roadway. So I'm going to recommend that we delete that, and they can take it to the city council to either uphold it or put it back in. That would be my recommendation. Darrell, what are the other things you want to look at?
My comment on that would be that the standard that's been referenced there doesn't apply to a driveway. If we're going to apply that standard, then we have to apply it to every drive aisle in the whole parking lot, because it's a private driveway. It doesn't make sense to take a city street standard and apply it to a driveway. It's just a private access driveway that gets us to the parking lot. It's no different than the other driveways that are on site. I don't know why the city engineer insists on applying the public road standard to that particular street. It's just a driveway. I guess every driveway in town that comes on the street now all has to have curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and has to be 40 feet wide.
Well, we're on the same page with that. I think the recommendation is to delete that
Okay,
for the reasons that we've spoke about, and that can be taken up with city council for final approval.
But so I'm going to have to take this project to city council next month?
I don't see why it needs to go to city council.
Anyway, let's move on to your other items.
Okay. Down at the bottom of the page, condition 3D, number 4, or IV, says, if the box culvert is to be a private crossing. The box culvert is in the middle of a piece of property that's owned by the city. It can't be a private crossing. So I would say that the next condition, which says if the box culvert is offered as a public crossing, is the only option we have here. So let's delete the one above it, or I'll choose to ignore it because I don't see how it applies to this project.
If I may, staff would agree with that. That would be one condition that they have. The applicant has satisfied staff's original concerns that the improvements that were shown were not identified as being private or public, and therefore staff was attempting to write something that would cover both of those scenarios.
So we can eliminate 4.
You can eliminate 4, yes.
Okay.
And
Which one are we eliminating?
this is on page
D.
15,
415.
and it's number 3, comes down to D, and then
Okay.
it's number 4. Okay, Mr. Whitten?
Okay. Condition 8A.
Page?
On page 17. Condition 8A says CC&Rs have not been provided to ensure reciprocal. That the word "not" should be deleted. They have been provided.
They have been provided now.
Well, we can delete A, can't we? Lauren?
Yes, sir. Yeah,
We'll
we
just
discussed that
delete A
earlier.
instead of
Yes,
changing the word,
they have satisfied us with
which
the
was
CCNRs.
provided, So remove.
Okay. Condition 8B needs to be deleted for 2 reasons. First of all, because a development agreement has not been requested by the applicant, therefore the it's not an appropriate condition to put on the map. And number two, the condition says, enter into a development agreement between the city and the subdivider prior to tentative parcel map approval. I think we're here tonight to get tentative parcel map approval. So how are we going to do this before we have tentative parcel map approval? And besides that, a development agreement has to be approved by the Planning Commission anyway. So please delete condition number 8B. Condition number 8C says post-parcel map improvement security for the construction of all on-site and off-site. That condition should read for all off-site improvements. On-site improvements shouldn't have to be bonded for before you record the map. And that would be the limit of my edits to the conditions.
Lauren, any comments on B and C?
Yes, Commissioner. If the commission is not inclined to develop an agreement prior to, and generally development agreements are entered into prior to a tentative map, and this was written as a notice to the developer that this would be a requirement that we would want to take care of prior to the tentative map. But if the commission is uncomfortable with the development agreement at this time, then staff would suggest something on the lines of that the improvements be constructed upon the first. All the improvements be constructed in total upon the first permit applied for, and that would satisfy the requirements that all the improvements would be installed. It would also work with the parcel map provisions within the Subdivision Map Act that the first building permit that's applied for would be responsible to make sure that all the improvements in total were constructed. And again, the reason for this development agreement is to give the city the a clarity in the any kind of phasing or the development or the construction of those improvements relative to the development. So staff would recommend that the condition be amended to indicate that the improvements would be constructed in total upon the first permit application.
Okay, the
Could I suggest
frustration I have with that, just a minute,
something? Okay.
is, and this is just a personal perspective, is when we look at C and the engineer is asking for, well, we'll bond the off-site and not the on-site. If we have the first development come in and we require all the on-site improvements to be put there, and a bank doesn't go on that site and a restaurant doesn't go on that site, then all the improvements end up changing. And I've seen a number of developments in other communities where in this subdivision, this restaurant did their improvements and access to the main road. So all the off-site, the bridge, the Sanders, all the off-site improvements are done to meet the requirement of that first developer. But to require all on-site, my concern is that that's going to be an expense that's going to be eaten by somebody because it may change. And we've talked about that in the staff report. And I agree that it should be bonding the off-site. I'm not inclined to require the development agreement at this stage. And so that's. And I appreciate what staff is saying, but I understand it. I don't want staff to feel like I don't understand what he's saying. However, I look at this and I go, if I develop 5 and I don't have the others developed, and I start having to put asphalt and curb, gutter, sidewalks, create a pad, access and all of that, one, it's an expense that may get torn out. So then we end up with a patch, and then you end up with half the roads like we have here in the valley instead of a solid piece that's put there. So anyway, that's my recommendation. Darrell, did you have other items?
No, that's fine. Just the items that I've already addressed.
Thank you, Lauren.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I might also recommend that we suggest or recommend that if there is landscaping on the site, that the developer request an irrigation meter such that his sewer standby fees would not reflect his water going through his domestic meter.
I think that could be a recommendation, but I don't think should be a condition of.
It'd just be a recommendation that they install
and you understand
irrigation
what that
meters.
is, right, Darrell?
Absolutely.
Okay,
It will
'cause
be a part
where
of the
our
water
sewer-
plans.
Yeah, where our sewer fees are based upon water usage, it's a good idea for commercial establishments. Okay, so is there anything else from the public on this? From the commission?
I'm a little confused. I got a little bit lost on C. What are we changing on 8C?
8C, all we're doing on that first line is the construction, post-parcel map improvements, security bonding for the construction of all, cross out the on-site and
Okay.
just leave off-site.
Okay.
And we will remove A and B.
Yeah, I'm good with those changes.
So I need a,
I have a couple of
Yes.
changes, as usual in the dates. So
okay, what page are you on?
page 11, I'm sorry, section 3, within 18 months, that falls on October 25th, 2018.
Oh, October.
Which
25th?
item are you on?
25th.
2018.
And on page 18, we are signing as of today, not as of 28th day of March, on the last page.
Where's that?
It says 28th day of March, but it should be April 25th. 25th day of March, April.
Did you get all those, Heather? Okay. And on the below conditions have been satisfied by, what's our time range that we want to give? That's on your page 11.
Do we have to give a time range there, or?
Conditional approval, the proposed site plan is hereby approved, subject to the following condition. The conditions must be met within 18 months, October 25th, or as supplemented in the condition unless. So we're leaving it at 18 months, correct?
Whenever he completes, that's when he signs and then puts the date, I think. That's what I understood from it.
Okay.
Just the date is wrong. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. That probably would have been accurate as of, February, right?
Yes, sir.
I believe the municipal code has the approval of the map being 24 months. So the site plan approval would be 18 months, but the map approval would be longer, I believe.
So what you're requesting is all of it be tied to the 24 months.
Well, I'm okay with the site plan being 18 months. I think the site plan is 18 months is fine, and if we can always come back with a new site plan. But the way the municipal code is written with regard to maps are typically good for 24 months, but then they're also eligible for another 12-month extension beyond that. So we can keep the map alive for 3 years, even though the site plan may have to come back for review.
Is that right, Lauren?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So we need to amend Section 3 to the proposed site plan is hereby approved, subject to the following conditions. These conditions must be met within 18 months. The subdivision needs to be met within 24 months.
Yeah.
Do I have a proposal?
Do we want to get those read back to us, make sure we got all of them? That was a lot of changes.
Sure. Okay, so we're going to remove the,
Let's start at the front. You want me to read them?
you're going to remove A and B. And
Okay.
8C is going to have the change to no longer say on-site and just say off-site. And then you're going to change the dates. First, the date is wrong. It should be October 25th, 2018. And then you're going to have the site plan for 18 months, and then the subdivision would be 24 months and eligible for a 1-year extension.
Okay, I didn't hear remove L on preamble comes down. It's page 15. It's on number 1 and it's L.
A1.
A1, or no, it's L.
Yeah, it's 1L is removed.
1L. Or AL, isn't it? Oh, 1L, yes. Okay, do I have a
And then-
proposal?
Did we get 3D4 is removed? Is that on there?
Item 4.
Was that?
D4? 3D4.
Yeah, 3D4. I wrote down as removed. I think that's good.
Yeah, 3D4.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes,
you could also remove on page 14A, 1AI. It refers to if the streets are to be private. And I think the engineer has satisfied that by clearly identifying what streets are to be public and what streets are to be private.
okay, page 14A, 1A.
1AI.
I. Correct. And then Heather, you did get 3, 4, 3D4.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a recommendation?
I so move with those changes.
I'll second that.
Chairman Cox,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Rajaratnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Yates,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanders,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferris.
Daryl, thanks. I know that was hard and painful. But thanks to the staff, the commission, thanks for working with us and being patient. We'll try and help you move forward as long as we can keep everybody happy. Now, I don't know that's always possible, but thank you. Okay, moving on to 8B, SPR 17-06, a request by Ridgecrest Investors LLC to construct a Phase 198-unit municipal family or multiple family residential apartment complex on 13.32 acres, APN 479-01-12 and 14. Staff report.
That's great.
Thank you, Chairman. I just got to the right slide.
Good timing.
Yes. Before you is SPR 1706. Did I do that right? Yes. And we have, again, a modified resolution in front of you. This one is not as modified as possible. We simply forgot to include the fire condition, which we added to the existing one you've seen already. The only difference is that we added the fire condition. That's the standard fire condition we always use. Also, we have attached for your information on this particular parcel, there was a resolution and a staff report that was done before the Planning Commission in February of 2016 on a project on that property. I would point out, however, that this application is a brand new one and represents a new application with a new plans and so on. So we want to make sure that that's the case. But we wanted to give you the history on this project a little bit, and that did exist back in 16. This project is going to be a phased project. The applicant, the unusual part of this application is the owner. We have two owners actually of parcels right now. The first owner owns the one parcel which is zoned R2, which is the one that they're going to do phase 1 on, and we're going to talk about essentially tonight as well. The second one is a separate owner that owns, and it's zoned as CG property, which is a different owner, as you can see in the slide that I have in front of you. The architect is present, I believe. Our representative is here tonight as well, along with the owner and the developer. The proposal is to construct 198 residential units over 3 phases and in approximately 4 years. The city has, in this case, we did require up iota, and we're recommending a negative deck again. And again, next time we have a project come before you, we will provide the negative deck and the state checklist that we've set out. The project site is, again, we have the difficulty in that it is 2 zones, which will require at some point an underlying land use change, because the general plan has the property as a commercial, and the commercial property would then have to be rezoned to R2 in order to make the project work when we get to phases 2 and 3. The access is off of Downs. The site's about 13.32 acres. And I'll pass it on here. You can see this is the projected site. As you can see, it's made up of the 2 different parcels which are zoned differently in the general plan. And the city planning right now, which is 1R2, which we're working on for phase 1. But in order and you will see in the conditions that we have, in order to move to the second parcel, they will have to go through a land use change, a zone change, in order to get that property to be utilized as presented. An aerial view of the total site looks, you see here in front of the pictures. It obviously is on Downs, and again, Bowman. We seem to have a lot of properties going on, projects on Bowman lately. The civil engineer involved in this project is a gentleman you may be aware of called Mr. Witten, and he has done a few projects in town, so we get an opportunity to have the project reviewed by him as well. If I can get the slide to move. So we have the 2 different lots, as you see here, which is sort of the unique portion. This is just a photograph of Downs and at Willow, so that you can see that the difference there in the property. There's a median on Downs during that portion, and then Willow's going down that way, looking west, across ways. Again, it's a undeveloped lot at this point in time. These are just some pictures to give you some view of what we're talking about, in case you're not aware. I'm sure Planning Commission is already aware of the location, but these are just some photographs that were taken for you along the bike path that's on Downs as well. This is which is where I'm going to leave you with, is the site plan that we have received. You can see that phase 1 is the yellowed area. Phase 2 will then enter into the CG area, the commercial area, and then Phase 3 will also involve the commercial area. But Phase 1 was just R2. And this is the detail of the Phase 1 project. And at that point, I'd like to turn it over to the chairman, and we can go for questions and information that they might like to have.
Commission comments?
The only comment or question really I have is to staff is, I mean, I just haven't seen this process done before where we change the zoning. I mean, I guess what is the typical process to change the zoning that we usually need to go through?
The zoning can be changed. The difficulty is the underlying land designation, use designation that's in the general plan. That requires that we go through a process that requires us notifying the state of a change in the general plan associated with the land use. So we would have to come back. It's like a two-stage process. We have to go in, change the underlying land use, and then come back with another resolution that changes the zoning, if the Planning Commission chooses to want to do that.
So we change the land use first through the general plan,
And then you
we
change the zoning, correct.
Okay.
In this case, we would point out that since it's adjacent to residential and it's in a residential area, that I don't think, that from a staff standpoint, we don't believe that it's a huge jump to be able to allow that. Typically, if the underlying land use was residential, then you could actually downzone, if you will. You can put residential or down use. Residential is considered to be a lesser intense use than commercial.
Okay.
So, I mean, technically, we can't
to
do that
allow
because the
this-
underlying land use is different, but yes.
So to allow this, we don't necessarily have to rezone.
Well, we do in the
commercial
sense that
kind
you
of
can't have
covers them
you can't have a land use that's residential and then an overlying that says commercial zoning. So we got to do both.
One of the considerations for the commission to consider, and I guess I'd ask Tech if my mic is, can you guys hear me out there? Okay. Is in the general plan, each one of these commercial spots in a residential or multifamily area was designed. Now, the example that I would use, and they were put there purposefully, not just because they're randomly there. If you think of the fast trip that's on Upjohn and Downs, that's probably the most popular convenience store that's in the area. And so if you look across the street to this, you'll also see a little commercial strip that's in there. They were put in there in the master plan by design to have these neighborhood access areas for gasoline or convenience stores or so on and so forth. And so one of the concerns I have is the zone, is that we're considering something without having a separate hearing on a zone change and the merits of a zone change. The Planning Commission in 2016 already approved 81 unit. It was 81 one-unit bedroom units and 27 two-bedroom units and 2 three-bedroom units, I believe, and 2 four-bedroom units, and a community center. Mm-hmm. In this particular plan right here, is this the 16? Yeah, no, this is the current phasing.
That's
now,
the phasing map.
Now, and so I just as well get into maybe some of my concerns without running through all of them. In this one, in the phasing, in the 16 phasing, it included the community center and the swimming pool. In the event that they only build phase 1, now they've got timelines on phase 2 and 3, that doesn't address the zone change, then you're left with a facility that has no amenities and no amenities around it. And would it be viable? Now, I use the example, I live over in the Dieter section off of Las Flores and Norma. And we have a set of apartments there on Drummond and Norma. And we've had problems in the past, but they're urban, they're boxy, they're hard to keep filled. We end up with problems, but that's neither here nor there. I'm concerned that, like in the first approval that we approved in last year, it included the clubhouse and the pool, and there was some amenities that would draw. The other concern I have is if you look at the two apartment complexes that are down by the ball field, they have a design. Now, let me point out in this, go back and show the design of the buildings.
We haven't actually shown them.
Or forward, right there. Okay. Now, there's a front view and a back view, and you don't see the bottom very good. But let me go into, we have in our code, a community design element of the general plan. I'm not sure whether the developer or the designer looked at that to meet conditions. Number one, linear entries and common landing running along the face of the building are discouraged. There's a lot of things that are discouraged. It doesn't mean you have to have them. You come down, a provision of private open space for each unit to encourage this would include like a patio or a balcony. It comes down, it says long, unbroken lines of garages and carports on both sides of the drive aisle are discouraged. That's exactly what we've got here. It goes on because of the potential bulk in multiple family structures, facade and roof lines, architectural and are vital to providing a desirable product. Now, this urban look is popular in many places, but the reason I use the apartment complexes down by the ball field, they have the architectural design other than just flat roof, box, garage, truthfully, I have a problem with that architectural design. The developer originally said he would provide access off of the east wall and provide a bike and walking lane over to our walking lane. And I think he has said that he would do that on this, but it's not in our resolution. There's things like that leave me with concerns on this, whether or not it meets our community design element. But I think for me, this needs to come back first for a zone change if that's what we want to do. But you need to understand why they were put there on the general plan and whether or not you want to take them out. Right. And granted, you've got 5 blocks away, you've got Walmart, and so on and so forth. And so I'm not saying you can't, or I would discourage you from changing that, but at least take it seriously and realize that's why they were put in the master plan. So those are just some of the concerns that I have on this particular development, feeling like that we should have first heard the zone change rather than all of it at once. Commissioner or staff? Yes,
I can comment in that the staff looked at this because Phase 1 is in R2, and the project is being proposed for R2, that the Phase 1 projects within the zoning required. The developer is taking a risk, frankly, that if the zone change is not permitted in the CG area and we determine that it needs to remain commercial, that their project would not be able to be, Phase 2 would not be able to be built in that particular lot. So what we have in front of us is essentially Phase 1. The development is showing you what they hope to build in Phase 3 and 2. However, if the developer wishes to take a risk that he may not be able to build Phase 2 or 3, Phase 2 in particular, because of the zoning issue, then at that point they wouldn't be permitted to do Phase 2. And we pointed out that in the conditions. If you take a look at the conditions, it identifies that in order for them to build Phase 2, they would be required, or to propose Phase 2, they would be required to make they'd have to go through the zone change process and be accepted. The other item you mentioned relative to the community area, obviously the city doesn't dictate to a developer what he wants to put into his project. If phase one is only built, and he then is responsible to the owners who bought that property, if he sells that property with a community plant center and all that as part of the deal, and he doesn't build it, then he has a liability to the buyers, but the city doesn't. So the community center is again a choice of the private developer, not the city, and it's not at his risk. The big concern that I have, and that we talked about with our engineering department, was in phase one. If you'll notice, if all they ever built was phase one, there's only one entrance and out, and fire. It would be the issue that I have, is whether or not our fire department will have issues with the egress and ingress into that phase one property. So we're seeing 3 phases, but we're being asked essentially to approve one. And the one that we're looking at is the one that is totally in R2. So as far as the architectural issue associated with that, although the general plan does talk about these are the goals that we have, there's no I do not have a staff, and I don't believe Lauren does in the engineering side, a condition that we can oppose in terms of the municipal code that requires the developer to do one kind of architecture or another. And so, although I agree with you, sir, that it is the goal of the general plan to have that kind of architecture, the general plan doesn't directly relate to the municipal code that identifies to a developer what kind of building he wants to build or design. And so, although certainly I would recommend to him that he should consider the general plan in his architecture if he can. It's not something that staff had a way to condition, so it's not in the conditions. So that's why you don't see it in the conditions. However, the condition relative to the zoning is definitely is in your conditions for this particular project approval, because again, they can't build 2 if we don't do this, if they don't submit for the zone change and it gets approved.
Well, I don't see with phase 2 or 3 any other entrance or exit. I don't see on-site water retention on this site, a catch basin of any sort. The other concerns I have is if you count the parking on phase 1 and you count the units, which they declare are X amount of bedrooms. So if we figure just 2 people in each one and 2 cars, and my concern is that most people, not all people, use their garage for their storage and not for their cars. We have completely, unless it's in a CC&R that says you have to have 2 cars, if you have 2 cars, they're parked in the garage and you can't use them for storage, we don't have enough parking. If visitors come, we don't have enough parking. Those are just some more of the things that I have as a concern with this particular development. Back to what staff has said, we approved the multiple family site last year, which includes all of this except for the commercial side. The question that I would have is, does the same developer own both parcels, or
No.
are they in negotiation? So
You'd have to ask the developer. I shouldn't say that. My current understanding is there's 2 owners, so 2 separate parcels.
Yeah, there are 2 separate partnerships, and some, but not all of the same parties are in both partnerships. So they're really 2 separate legal owners, but they're not unrelated.
So if we have any disagreement, if we approve, this phasing, and that there's any disagreement, then we may still have a problem. So my thing is, they have an approval for a unit already zoned correctly, but for the commercial side, but there again, the architecture of the other one that was approved last year was great. And it's just a personal thing. So wait a minute. Let's finish with the commissioners and their questions, and I'll turn it over to public. So any other questions from the commissioners?
So is the request to approve only phase 1 or all the phases now?
No, they're only requesting, we'd only be approving phase 1. If you read the conditions, they have to come back to us for phase 2 and 3. And particularly because, again, they both end up in a CG zone. Part of the phases involve the CG zone, so we have to have the approval.
So it's going to be a 3-story residential apartments. Are they going to have?
They're not apartments, they're condos.
Condos, but you said apartments here though, so that's why I'm saying.
I apologize for that language. They are
So-
apartments?
That's how
Okay.
I understood it was.
I apologize.
apartments.
I was under the impression they were going to be condos. So they're going to be apartments at this time. Okay.
Yeah, that's how I understood it.
I apologize for that.
So are they going to have an elevator or do you know anything about the plan?
The architect, as you're talking, is sitting
No,
in the
no,
audience.
he's asking Lauren, aren't
Yeah.
you? Lauren, staff?
Do you know if they're going to have an elevator because it's a 3-story?
If I understand your question.
An elevator?
Elevator.
Are they going to have an elevator?
Oh, I have not seen the improvement plans
Oh,
for the structures. I'm sorry, I have not.
No elevator. Okay.
Staff report. Commissioners, any other question?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay, so at this time, we'll turn it over to public comment. Sirs?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that what we've done is substantially upgraded the quality of the units from our last submission roughly a year ago. We've gone from where the parking was in carports, we've gone now to enclosed parking, we've gone to townhouse units. And let me introduce the architect. He can talk about it. And we've gone, the 2-bedroom are like 1,300 square feet. So I have the architect address the quality of the improvements, but that's part of the reason that we decided not to go with the community in phase 1, because there's been no new projects built in Ridgecrest that are market rate for something like 30 years, and the rents are like at $1 a square foot, and to build new construction, especially the quality of what we're planning, is going to require maybe $1.50 a square foot. So in order for us to get the project built with the kind of quality that we're after, we figure let's move some of the required for the full project to the second phase, because if we can get the first phase financed and built, we figure with the quality that we'll be able to rent them, and that it'll be much easier for us to get financing and pay for any additional requirements and community room, certainly in phase 2, and obviously the same thing in phase 3. But that's why we've done such a small project, and we've spent the additional money to buy the additional land, again, because we feel that a high-quality project, one that, as I say, has like 1,300 square feet for a 2-bedroom, there's nothing like it in town, and that, we're benefiting the city, and again, it's hard for me to, defend not doing the community room. We'd certainly like to have it, but we're most anxious to get the project off the ground, and so and a high-end project with enclosed parking for each of the units. Dave, do you want to come and address the kind of some of the questions and the quality of the interior improvements?
Gary, can I change the slides some way? Great.
This is forward, and that's back.
But point it there.
You guys point it that direction. That's right there.
Good evening. My name is Dave Mitani. I'm with Shelter Architects. Gary, your order, how do I get to the site plan here?
Backwards.
Backwards.
Keep going.
This was the only site plan you had, Gary?
I believe that's the only one we have as part of the project.
Okay, maybe I can kind of orient everybody and just tell you the general concept of how this is planned. Beyond the phasing of the 3 phases, really the idea was with one access, and this, incidentally, this site plan, Daryl was kind enough to take it to the fire department to make sure that they had no problems with access, and their preliminary view on that, they were fine with the one access opposite right at the center. Now, that said, there's always possibilities of adding pieces to downs if we needed, or access into downs if we needed that. But the general planning of this isn't so much just rectilinear buildings placed on the site. They're really quite intentional. One of the big reasons that they're placed on the site this way, and north is to the right, is that we're very attuned at trying to place buildings in the correct solar orientation with the weather, especially that happens here. So the ones that are going up and down are really east-west orientation. So we're trying to keep as much of them east-west, probably 2/3 of them east-west as much as possible, so that we only have north and south orientation. Try to avoid west orientation as much as possible. So the way that we've planned these is, you can see there's a group of 3 buildings. If you took any corner here, say the upper right-hand side, where we have 3 buildings. And what we're trying to do is to do a ring road around the entire site, and then provide motor courts to get the cars off of, secured off of these motor courts. So if you came down one of the T-shaped areas that are shown there, those all access the garages for the units. So to understand the units, really, there are 2 and 3 bedrooms. They range almost up to 1,600 square feet for the 3 bedrooms. We have about 10% of those, but primarily 2 bedrooms. And so the idea is really to get townhomes. If you can envision an entry on one side, on the garden side. On the vehicular side, we have a 2-car garage. So every unit has an enclosed 2-car garage. Then the second floor, as you walk up internally, would have the common areas, the kitchens, the dinings, the living rooms, and then on top of that would be the bedrooms. So everybody has a self-contained 2-car garage, direct access unit. It's not a standard garden-style apartment where everybody walks out into their carports in order to get served. So the idea of getting these clusters of motor courts, the big idea here is really safety. And so anybody that walks to any one of those rectilinear buildings can walk from a garden area, never cross a road. And so the north-south, which is to the spine down the middle, everybody's able to access, never cross the road. If you have children, you're able to never cross the road. You can bring your bike along that path. The intention is that we would go out to the left to hit the bike lane so that everybody could use that. But really, the premise is pedestrian circulation overriding the car here is what we're trying to do. This is phase 1. It's only 22 units. It does work parking-wise. Every phase that we have planned here complies with the municipal code parking ordinance, which is, I believe, for every 2-bedroom, we need 2 cars. For every 3-bedroom, we need 2.5 cars, but then we also need to provide guests 1 per 3 units, as well as recreational vehicles, which we're providing as well, oversized spaces. The elevations are really a little hard to look at because they're just so 2-dimensional, so I'd like to defer mainly to the 3 dimensions on this. And with respect to Commissioner Cox on the look and the out of place, this is modern. I would not classify it as urban, because obviously we're not urban. And one of the big ideas that we're trying to bring here is there is a desert modern vernacular that does exist. And it's really quite intentional on how it's planned. You notice that we don't have big, giant, long horizontal windows. We have narrow windows. It's almost Pueblo-like as far as trying to control the heat gain on this. We are trying to bring a simplicity to these. Everybody has a separate, because they're all stacked townhomes, everybody has a intentional entry, which if you could look in the upper left-hand corner, there is a private patio, which is quite generous for everybody to come into a private patio, come up their front door, go up the next 2 floors as well. We tried to bring some relief to the garage side, which is the motor court, which is the bottom right-hand side. And you can see that this just isn't a stacked window over top of window over top of window on this, and we're trying to bring every level to have its own separate character. The outside and the sides, the small side, is really quite important because that's the side that faces the community, which is really Downs. And so you're going to see a lot more of that. And what we're trying to do on that is, again, the middle, we switched to green. We tried to change the palette a little bit on the middle building, so we have two types of color variations. There is a stepping on this building in the middle. The developer is not required to provide handicap accessible units to this because they are townhomes, but they have intentionally provided 8 units that have bottom accessible units for people that may need them on the community. So 8 of the total are accessible on the bottom floor. Fully accessible, fully adaptable on that. Another look of kind of the middle pieces and the step downs. Then one thing I wanted to show you was an entry. We're trying to flank those with signage on both sides that you come down the middle. And this is what you would see. Really, those first 2 buildings are what you would see in Phase 1. And then you can see that these rectilinear buildings, the courtyards, a lot of times you could just provide courtyards and linear courtyards between each one of these, but we're trying to connect those. You see the bottom left-hand corner, we're actually providing small walls with gateways that allow you into the courtyards after that. So it's really connecting these 2 buildings together. We're playing a little bit, I mean, it's called Red Rock. We're playing a little bit off of Red Rock Canyon State Park and bringing some of those colors into the project as well. These are the ring road sides that you would see. And really kind of the idea is they really aren't boxes. We've provided a base, not so much on the bottom floor, but on the bottom 2 floors, but provided a very clear top delineation along the top. So they aren't, the flatness is not really there. And so when I look at boxes, they're pretty flat. These have a lot of articulation, and they are really trying to respect the desert, modern desert vernacular. I think that's the last slide in the courtyard. And of course, this doesn't show all of the landscaping. We did submit a landscape plan that doesn't happen to be in this presentation that shows what we're trying to accomplish. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What is the width of the roadway into the units? Put the slide back. This one right here.
Between in the motor courts?
Yes.
Those are 28 feet. And then there's about another 6 or 7 feet for planting areas that we can put trees and vertical trees up against the garage.
Well, the reason I ask that for the commissioners and as well as the developers is if I'm going to rent this and I bring my U-Haul in there and I park in the middle of that street, how many garages have I just shut off? How do I move in and out without irritating my neighbors?
Well, I
Because
think
I'm going to back my U-Haul right up to the garage, and I've got a 28-foot truck. How many garages am I going to interfere with?
Well, in a garden-style apartment, it would be the same thing. What that width of that, the 28 feet, is really a common width, and I think it is mandated. And so any other roadway along here, say that we didn't have that, and we had garden-style apartments, and we had carports lining that entire ring road, it would still be the same condition. You would still be blocking.
And I can understand that. I'm thinking of you go to the top of the T. If I'm one of those units, I could end up blocking everybody until I'm through moving.
What would be the solution to that, though? I don't know how they would
I don't know what
change
the
that.
solution to be either.
Well, my question, sir, was how wide is the 2-car garage? You're saying these units have 2-car garages, correct?
Correct.
How wide is that garage area?
It's a standard 20-foot garage. It's like a single-family home garage.
20 by 20.
Yeah. So the beauty of this is everybody has attached garages direct to their unit.
Okay. Any other public comment?
Yeah, there was one thing I want to emphasize. I don't think there's any project here, in fact, there's very few projects done anywhere where, for children, they can walk through the whole project without traversing a driveway with cars. And that was our primary focus on the design of this, not so much worrying about, something temporarily blocking driveways, but for the life of the project, for 50 or 75 years, to have a project that has, the driveway around the side, but the kids can go to the pool, to the common area, and walk through the project without ever crossing a driveway with cars. We felt that was much, the critical design element of our plan for this project.
Okay.
I'm actually really excited for a truly market rate housing project to come to Ridgecrest. This is something the City Council has been trying to bring into Ridgecrest for several years now. Before I got on the City Council, we even had an agreement to basically. I don't know if force is the right term, but I mean force one of the developers to do market rate housing at the expense of giving them some low-income rate housing subsidies, and that fell through, and we never got that, And so this is, I think it really could be a good amenity to the town to have market rate housing, particularly for a lot of the young engineers. This is exactly the kind of thing they're looking for. I don't know about aesthetics. I really can't speak to that. I mean, I basically have my wife pick out all my clothes for me, but I mean, I don't see any other problems.
That was the consideration. In fact, the driving force when they brought their development to us last year, and we were excited because that's what it was. The design's different, and like I say, for me, we ought to address the zoning issue. Even in phase one, I see no on-site retention for water. That has not been addressed. I see here what looks to be grass. I don't know that a landscaping plan is accompanied with this because it would have to be turf, not grass. Anyway, to meet low water use, things of that nature, and some of those things are not in the resolution. So. For me, it's not a deal breaker. It's just I have some concerns, and wonder if all we're doing is approving phase one, then we can just look at phase one. It meets the appropriate zoning, but we do need to address whether or not you want to do something with the general commercial at some later date or something.
You can't. I'm sorry, we're having a visual conversation, and we shouldn't do that. But if indeed the developer wanted approval on all phases 2 and 3, we could not do that tonight. They would have to go back and go through the zone change and land use change before we even considered phase 2 and 3.
I think that's what we'd like to do.
Okay, so if that's the choice of the developer, staff's recommendation would be to postpone this until such time as we have a zone change and we go through that process. And
that's not what they're asking.
No, that's what
they're asking for phase one to be approved.
No, they just came back and said phase 2 and 3 all at once.
We would like the entire project
Okay.
to be approved.
Well, then you're going to have
That's our intention, is to have the entire
Well,
project.
and that's where I was, is we need to have that zone change and have a public hearing on that to get that approved if we're looking at all three. If you're just looking at phase one, you meet the zoning requirements.
Right. Right. No, we understand.
Okay.
We're well aware.
Okay.
So,
Staff's recommendation would be to postpone it, take it off until such time as those items, and I don't believe we can continue it. We'd have to resubmit it. because we're going to have to go through another steps to get there.
So the other things, as long as you're looking at this and it's having to come back and we're going to do a public hearing on zone change and stuff like that, identify, because it looks like in the southeast corner, is that a water retention basin?
Yes.
Okay. And then it would have to be whether or not the staff felt like that was sufficient for the entire project for retaining the water. The other condition that you'll probably meet, and it'll cause considerable consideration, is you're butting up against the easement that the city has and adjacent to the Bowman Channel. We talked about this when the project was brought to us in 16. And I gave you alternatives for multiple access, for bicycle access, and so on and so forth, rather than coming right over to the Bowman Channel, which may require you some participation in that Bowman Channel, just as we discussed in the other public hearing, the conditions that are in that resolution, things that they will need to do on that Bowman Channel, which will add an expense. So I just want you to be aware of that if you're not.
We're well aware of that. And actually, it was my vision to make this project connected to the Bowman Channel. And I actually reserved an easement on the rear of the property to actually do that when we didn't own this other piece of property. So it was always our intention to have a connectivity to the Bowman Channel and the bike path. And that was part of our initial design, and we actually proposed it originally.
Well, I didn't want you to have surprises.
No, I understand.
So that as everything's prepared, this is the direction we want to go, and that we can help with you or help it, or we can have challenges, and I don't want it to have delays that you don't need. Mr. Whitten.
I submitted a letter regarding the conditions of approval.
Right.
And is that a part of the agenda packet?
Right.
Okay, so you're aware of my
Yes,
concerns about the
and
off-site
we also
improvements?
have additional staff report and attorney's report relating to it. So,
Okay. Are they?
Anyway, that can be provided to you for our next hearing, so that you're at least aware of where we're standing, and that way everybody's on the same page. I don't want you to incur any expense that you don't need, but on the same token, we need to satisfy what the city is requiring.
I have a question. It appears to me that you did not receive the staff report or the documents that were forwarded. I want to make sure we don't have a communication error someplace, because the staff report should have been sent out to you along with the attachments associated. Because in the staff report, it clearly states, for example, clearly has a condition that says if you do phase 2 and 3, you have to go through the zone change process. Did you get the copy of those conditions?
I got a staff report from Heather on April 25th. But it did not have the, no, wait a minute. The staff report, the conditions that she sent was...
Should have been a copy of the draft resolution.
Okay, it was last Thursday that I got conditions from Heather.
Mm-hmm. Right.
For this Thursday. Now, the conditions that I got from her for the other project were not current, but I think the conditions, the letter that I wrote was in response to these conditions.
Right.
So I think I have the current conditions.
Okay, I was just making sure that if we send it to everybody's getting, you're just, I want to make sure we're sending it to everybody so you're not surprised.
I haven't seen it until tonight.
Okay, can you make sure that Heather gets, if I don't, that Heather, you have his address already, don't you, contact information? Oh, she's shaking her head, maybe. If you could, please, at the end, we get that so we get it out to you in the future.
You do have the correct addresses. That was in actually in the presentation.
Yeah, that was in the presentation, so, okay.
So, so that you have the conditions so that you look at them and we're aware. But, let's move forward on the zone change, if that's what you're looking for, and have a public hearing on that.
First thing you'll have to do is submit an application for the land use change.
Okay, so recommendation of staff is to table this and bring it back at a later date. Any other comments or questions from the commission for the developer or engineer?
I got one question. Do you guys need some time to confer and discuss whether or not you want to move forward with phase one, or
we do. We have every intention to move forward. I think it's necessary for us to have a complete approval in order to move forward. Certainly,
Okay.
We're going to be encumbering the project when we do the financing, and it needs to be a fully entitled site. That's going to be necessary. So.
okay.
Okay, so the only thing that I would say in relationship to our previous discussion is when you do phase one, may be required to do all off-site improvements.
Well, I think there may be some issues with that as well.
So there needs to be, kind of some discussion in relationship to that, but that's the second phase. I mean, zone change is the first, but, we need to make sure certain things are done, and I don't want Daryl to be up here scolding me how tough it is. I'm just teasing you, Daryl. So anyway.
We're very proud of this project. The product that we have designed here is infinitely superior to the product that that was designed in the last iteration of this project, and we're very proud of it. This is a very high quality product. It's very stable. It's a townhome, so it feels like a home. It doesn't really, they're contiguous, but it doesn't feel like an apartment. It feels like a home. It feels like it's a 3-story home. And one of the comments that we got from some of the brokers in town was that parking was critical, storage was critical. Our last project had field parking and some covered parking, which apparently from a marketing standpoint, as far as the brokers were concerned, was not as good. This product, I have built it before, and it's I consider it to be a very high order product in terms of multifamily. It's some of the nicest product you can offer is multifamily. I mean, the next thing up would be like mid-rise or high-rise. So the last product that we had designed was a typical, flat garden product, relatively inexpensive to build. This is a little bit more expensive, a little bit more homey, and a little bit better amenitized.
Any concerns that you get feedback-wise about a 3-story looking into the backyards of property adjacent?
Not that I can think of. I don't. It's always a concern. Privacy is always a concern.
Sure.
I think we consider privacy when we design the fenestration of the building, and I'm not sure that we feel like we have any issues here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
So reading through this again, because I had to refresh my memory here, what the actual wording in the condition is under community development number 4. It says prior to construction of phases 2 and 3, the applicant shall submit applications, receive approval for lot line merger and zone change and land use change. I'm kind of wondering if maybe that's where the confusion might have come from. Really, we need to just, I guess the takeaway here is we can't really even approve a plan for 2 and 3 until that zone is changed. Right?
That's correct. What I'm saying is that if they went forward with this project as it was presented as in essentially phase 1, they would be at risk because there's no guarantee that this commission is going to approve the zone change or the land use change.
Yeah.
So if that happens, they can't build 2 and 3.
Gotcha.
So, and their feeling is that they need, what I'm hearing them saying is they need all of the project
whole
approved.
project approved at the same
So
time.
that they can get financing for the entire project, is what I'm hearing.
Has to pencil out.
Yeah.
And so that's a developer's choice, so I think it's a good that we had this particular session, so we get it started. But we do need to go through those 2 phases first, if they want to have them all done.
So when we
at
talk
once.
about phase 1, 2, and 3, will you guys have put together some sort of a contract that ties the 2 owners together so that we don't approve a project, let's say, and then all of a sudden one developer says, "No, I don't want any part of this"?
Well, I have ownership interest in both properties.
Okay.
Another partner has interest, and we have a general agreement. And we could actually address it if it were really necessary. There could be some kind of agreement, but the entities are related. They're
Yeah.
two related.
Well, I've seen partners go sideways, and so I'm thinking, to have an approval for a project, I would hate for the willing party who can get financing to be held up by his wife.
Yeah, the only partner that's not common is his brother that was brought in on the second phase. So we're very comfortable with proceeding the way we have. I mean, obviously, if you need something, we can get that. But the one thing that I need to emphasize is that, once we get the zone changed and once we get quote approval, we need to make sure that we can get the first phase financed. And we need to be able just to build the 22 units and the amenities for the 22 units, and we can't load the first phase with additional requirements for the rest of the project, or we'll never get it financed.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? So the only reason for this discussion that I think is so that we have the time to go back and forth and you kind of have an idea what we're looking at and what you're trying to do, and you can see we can work with Mr. Witten and others and try to accomplish a common goal. We were thrilled, even with the 16 proposal, only from the standpoint because it addressed what we talked about as we have our young engineers that come in. It's just husband and wife, maybe one baby. And we don't really have apartment complexes that accommodate that small family, so that they come in for the first year or so and then decide to build or buy or whatever it is. And so the concept is absolutely what we're looking for, as Commissioner Sanders addressed. And so I don't want you to take any of the comments that I said as a negative as much as we have to address some things. And I'm not trying to put it off, but I don't want to get the cart before the horse either and then get you stopped midway.
Oh, no, that's very healthy. I mean, and we appreciate the feedback. What's changed, from phase 1, we'll call it phase 1, the 16 to the 17, is that the local brokers that are in charge of leasing apartments all hammered us, don't build carports, make sure that you have enclosed parking, and those are the units that are leasing. And so we scrapped those plans and spent, new money on new architecture to upgrade the quality of what we're offering. So there was no, we understand your excitement, and we're excited also to be able to provide, higher quality units than the 16 offering.
So no pro bono from your architect?
Different
depending on
architects
approval?
even. We even use different architects.
I'm just teasing.
And I would point out that I'm very pleased, just don't put anything on your roofs because you're at 34 feet and our code goes to 35. So you're 12 inches away from being out of code. So, 13 inches because you got to be 1 inch above.
Yeah, the
your
architect says
condensing
there's
units
nothing
have
on the
to be
roof.
on the ground for your mechanical and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Just
it's just information. So it's just
But,
conversation.
all the units are designed with extra office space for the engineers to be able to not only have bedrooms, but have, workspace to be able to work at home. So we're gearing the whole project to the, call it high quality, market for, for engineers that will not be buying their own home. And nothing is for sale, it's all for lease.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
We'll table this. Proposal is to table this and be brought back at a later time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 9, discussion and other action items, general plan. Staff?
Yes, Yes, Chairman, it was expressed by the Planning Commission that you'd like to delve into the general plan in terms of looking at modifications to that general plan that need to be updated in certain areas.
Jessica, take it outside, please.
Sorry. So what we did is, because we asked then for you the last meeting for direction on where you wanted to go in the general plan, and we also sent out an email asking what areas you wanted to work in. We suggested with one element at a time. However, that was not something you wanted to work on right now. So what we did is we just happened to pick the water area because that was what we talked about before. And I provided you in your package some of the general code items that are in there general plan items that are in the plan that we thought we want as an example that's been such a controversy relative to, for example, public services and facilities, goal LU 10. I'm sorry that I have a little problem.
10.5, multiple purpose detention facilities.
Right. The city shall utilize stormwater detention facilities to mitigate drainage impacts and reduce storage system. Well, obviously that's the case. To the extent practical, keyword, the stormwater detention facilities should be designed for multiple purposes, including recreation and storm and or storm quality improvements, water quality improvements. And some are discouraged as part of new developments or renovations. So that was kind of interesting language, because kind of what it's saying is we want to use them for parks, but not for water detention, for sumps. We don't want to use them for sumps. So I quite get that.
We have Pearson Park, which is exactly that.
Correct. Pearson Park is an example of one that the city owns and runs. The pocket parks, which is more likely what we're talking about, which is OSC 7-11. The city shall require the mitigation of pocket parks approximately a quarter to half an acre in its urban design concepts to create passive recreational and social public gathering spaces throughout the city where appropriate. I can tell you that came out of somebody else's general plan. It's an urban practice that's being done in like downtown LA, where they'll have an empty building area, they'll tear it out to provide open spaces for people to congregate in. So that's what's considered a pocket park. The park shall be maintained through the city's landscaping and lighting districts funds.
So each,
and that bothered me because obviously the city has no park funds, and we all all the department heads just got cut back budgets as well. So
but that's not true. The Horton track we talked about in infrastructure.
That's not a city-funded project.
But that's a lighting,
the problem
lighting and landscaping district.
But it says through the city's lighting and landscaping maintenance district funds. Well, so it's just a language issue here, but I'm just pointing out that's why we're talking about these areas.
Those funds come through the city, though.
The funds
but
do
it
come
says
through
the city funds.
No.
So staff interpret that as potentially it being the city parks department. So
city
this is a comment.
landscaping and lighting maintenance district funds, not the city funds, but the district funds. And there's a district created for each one of these parks.
Okay. Well, that's why this is why we brought these to you, is to start talking about, let's make it as clear as possible. And these are just something that we picked up. The other thing is the city shall require developers to include recreational assets and non-residential developments by incorporating shallow sumps, detention basins that could be used for recreation purposes. Now, what I was wondering about...
Pocket parks.
Or pocket parks, right. We're back to pocket parks again. Yeah. The issue I have with that is there's no size limitation here. So if I build a development of 2 homes and I need a sump, you want me to make it a park and create a lighting district for 2 homes? So you see, what I'm saying is many cities, and the reason I bring it up is we went out and looked at, and I have in your package, National Recreation and Parks Association example that they put out, which is one of their brochures. And in here it talks about parks should be, their comment is parks that serve residential population of approximately 500 to 1,000 people. So what they're saying is there's a size on the number of homes that you should have in the project before you consider a park, pocket park, or some usage in any way. So we did a look at that. In many cities, the range runs from 250 homes, 100 homes minimum. And Bakersfield has such a thing that says if you build a project above that number of homes, then you're required to do this pocket park or some type of park. That doesn't, we don't get into, we're not going to get into the landscape, how what's supposed to be in that park, but that kind of size. So I'm suggesting that one of the things you might want to consider, for example, in the general plan change, is something like that, where there's a size limitation or a maximum or minimum before you get into this sort of requirement for a park. I mean, because theoretically, if you got 2 homes, you don't need a park at the end.
Is that typical for the general plan, though, to have requirements like that? I mean, the general plan is kind of like, this is the idea, right? This is the goal.
Right, that's correct. But they have it in their municipal code, actually.
Well, I think he has a right.
They took the step to go into the municipal code, for example.
He has a right, too. I mean, size. Developments, by nature, talks about a subdivision. It doesn't talk about 2 homes. Right. But, that's an assumption. And so without specifying size, X amount of homes, the old F. Horton site, we required a pocket park to be up there. There is a lighting and maintenance district up there we've been collecting funds on, and I believe, Lauren, did you issue out, because we talked about infrastructure several months ago, approving sending that out for bid to maintain that?
Yes, sir, we do. We have a contractor on board to start maintaining that landscaping around the VR Holton track.
Okay, so one of the concerns, and I'm probably sitting too far back from my mic, one of the concerns in the general plan was that if we don't have some of these, we've got to do water retention anyway. So we can either have a sump like sitting behind Home Depot, or we can make it into something that will service the neighborhood. One or the other. And so consequently, where do you want to go with that? And Gary's right. What size of development would be required to have a lighting and maintenance district to support that? We have talked about other places. We've also had smaller subdivisions. The land off of Drummond and Downs, when they completed the road there on Drummond going west, there is a map there to complete a subdivision. We required on-site sump, but it was not a pocket park. And so I think it was, 38 units or something like that? It was 38 units. There is still going to have to be retention, but at what point do you say, we're going to require this pocket park or this sump park for recreation and have a maintenance and lighting district associated with it, or we're just going to have a sump? So I think he's right. We need to have direction on size of the development.
And then finally, if you do the larger ones that you're talking about, where there is a desire, whether it makes sense to put, if you do that, then the question is, is what kind of park do you want to put in there? In other words, do you want to require the developer to put in kids equipment? Like if you look at Pearson, there's kids, there's a basketball court, there's open space, there's all that kind of stuff. What do you make that park look like? If you just say a pocket park or a sump park, what does that mean to me? Well, to me, if I were a developer, being a developer, I'd say, well, that means I'm going to shallow out some dirt, and there you go, there's your park. And I'm going, that doesn't serve us, because obviously now you're creating a dust problem and some other issues associated with having a big open piece of desert. We've got a lot of land out there that around us that's sort of just open ground. So that leads you into the question of what do you want in these parks?
If some wording were in there, if we put some wording in there, general plan as such, saying like Pearson, who would maintain it?
That's the lighting and landscaping district that he's suggesting. The problem I had is we couldn't build another Pearson because it's all grass. We got a water problem. Remember we mentioned this again. So what kind? You'd be more like
Gateway Park. The downside,
Park,
the downside to some of this is consider liability. You start putting toys in, you have a liability. If you put shade, you put picnic tables and stuff like that, where the kids can run and play, or they can play soccer or baseball or, whatever it is, then there's maybe some things to do, even basketball. But, if the concrete ended up uneven, somebody tripped and got hurt, you still have a liability issue. But I think that we want to have some sort of recreation, but I'm not sure that we want to consider toys because of the liability.
And another kind of park, which you see in urban settings, could be essentially a planter with roses in it, a rose garden kind of planting with some shade structures to sit at. Maybe, we can't do it here, but they'd have water features in there, for example, a fountain or something. And it's just a space, open space for people to sit and relax and enjoy the day.
In the fall and the spring, not in the summer or winter.
Right. Well, it depends on where you are. If you're in San Diego, summer or winter works really well. But anyway.
I'm talking about our climate.
Yeah.
Kind of depends on what
Heather, we're about done.
Kind of depends on what your target, audience is for that park too. If it's a park right near the senior housing development, that's going to be very different, obviously, than something with a multifamily or single family.
And to be honest with you, if you said it's got to be a park, and it's got to be one of these three types of parks, for example, like a family park, a senior park, my rose garden or the play equipment or whatever. Yeah, we don't have water for golf, but miniature golf maybe. But anyway,
turf and miniature golf.
Yep. Then you could let the developer pick, because the developer of a senior project's going to want the senior park, and the developer of a family project's going to want the family park.
So I don't know.
So they'll build it to what meets their need. But if you give them like 3 models, you could do that.
How about the development that the chairman was talking about over at Downs and Drummond?
Pearson.
You're 2 blocks from Pearson Park.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense.
That's correct.
Park right there, and because there's so much, undeveloped land, how do you determine what goes in there?
Well, that comes back to the commission, truthfully. Okay, because just as we worked with the city engineer and made changes, we can do things, and they can appeal it to the city council. One of the concerns that I have is if you make it too big or too small, okay, if we put it at 50 units, then I'm going to design 49.
Yeah.
Okay? And so if you put a specific number in there, which we do talk about size, you could put it ambiguous in the aspect, and we'd have to ask Lauren or something and saying of larger nature, and then it's ambiguous, and we could consider through the process that this is big enough to warrant this kind of a park. I don't know. Lauren, any thoughts on it?
Well, the less specific yard gives you greater flexibility and allows you then to evaluate a project relative to other improvements to see if that's warranted or not, or see if that's something that...
So just do it on a case-by-case basis.
Exactly. That gives you the greatest flexibility. It gives you the opportunity to consider the size of that facility and
rather than specifying.
How it fits the community.
It does, however, put the staff in a situation of being somebody saying favoritism from one project to another, because you have no standard you're using.
Yeah.
Well, except that's a good point right there. You know, you might have 38 units that are sitting there, but you're a half a block from Pearson Park, you know, or a block away from it. It doesn't make sense. But in College Heights, we have nothing. And if we have nothing, maybe it would be that we require it. So I agree. So I think that would come back to choices, Gary.
Yeah.
That, and rather than making a recommendation that you do a park or so on and so forth, that you give us choices. You know, we're saying that there's these choices. You can either not require, or you could require, and and let us make the choice rather than the staff having to be making the choice.
Yeah, because it's
Thoughts?
And I guess the only, I agree with you entirely. The only downside is, as a developer, I guess there's a little more uncertainty going into a project on what they're going to have to pay for and what they're going to have to build. But I don't see a way around that.
Well, we've done it where, because just like this project that we just did, when I said there's no on-site retention in phase 1. What's your plan?
Right.
Oh, I'm going to have to give up a unit, or I'm going to have to give up some play area, or I'm going to, you know, how are we going to prove it with no on-site retention? We're worried about retention in phase 3? Well, that doesn't work.
If they'll never get there.
Okay, but yet you can consider ideas of putting the runoff into the Bowman Channel conditional of their improvements of the Bowman Channel. You know, but those are just things that you would have to consider or think of. The other one would be, you know, where you're located, rather than, well, you didn't make them do it. Well, that's because they're a block from a park. You don't have one. I don't necessarily get excited about what they're going to say at their podium in the aspect of whether or not it works or not for them, but you want to work with them and help the development go along.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be developer friendly, but
right.
But
on the same token, I agree with Lauren in the aspect that if we corral you in, pinch you in, that now we face that all the time. How many meetings have we had? Well, it says right here, and we've had to come back and amend, haven't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what he's stuck with.
Yeah.
And that's what Gary would be stuck with. Mm-hmm. And so I would rather enjoy maybe some options in the staff report rather than specify a size. In developments, make recommendations, you know, options. Like this is bordering an existing park. I would recommend not putting in a pocket park or da-da-da-da-da. But if you do want a pocket park, I would recommend maybe this style or this. Does that make your job harder or easier?
It makes it a little bit harder, but I think it's a way you can go about evaluating the process. I mean, if you create standards like we're talking about, then you've got fixed numbers. But we probably would want to have a general direction from the Planning Commission is, you know, we want to consider properties over 50. We don't really want to consider properties under 50. Those kinds of, not necessarily hard and fast, but more like guidelines that we can kind of utilize to get direction. So, and then also when we're talking to developer, we can give them, these are kind of the guidelines we're kind of looking at. We don't guarantee you what's going to happen, but this is what we're looking for. And so they can understand it as well, and can approach their project, make that work.
That makes sense.
Let's go back to the first one on OSC-7.11 on pocket parks. Our planner has concerns about parks. If we did the language, the park shall be maintained through lighting or landscape and lighting maintenance districts held in trust by the city. Because it is a trust account, you can't do anything else with it except that, right?
Well, technically, I'm not sure. Are the lighting and landscaping districts said the city of Ridgecrest Lighting and Landscaping District Or is it in fact
Lighting and landscaping, that's it.
But does it say, I understand lighting and landscaping, I'm asking, when we drafted it, does it say the City of Ridgecrest Lighting and Landscaping District?
Yes, it does. It's administered by the city.
The city council has
does
to approve
collect taxes from those parcels that are included within the boundaries of that district, and they pay towards the maintenance of that landscape and also the lighting that's within the development.
Okay. I see
So
some liabilities, but I'm not going
Well,
to deal with those right now.
Maybe an S, lighting maintenance districts, because everyone is a separate district, is it not?
It's a zone.
Zone of a district.
Generally an annexation, and then the assessment is relative to the benefit of that particular zone. you
Okay,
have
so
multiple
each,
zones with
it's
different-
not each lighting maintenance district, it is a zone within the district?
Yes, you have.
And it doesn't matter where it is in the
lighting
city?
maintenance district that establishes the very first of your districts. Then there are annexations, which are zones, and those have different assessments relative to the improvements or the benefits derived by those particular improvements. You don't have individual lighting, landscaping, maintenance districts. That requires an annual process of going through annual engineers' reports for every single and each one of them. So by zones, you have one annual engineer's report that covers all the zones.
And Lauren, my question is the funding separated from between each zone?
Yes, because each zone has
That was what I
unique
wanted, is it
costs.
commingled?
No, it's
And
not.
you can't commingle your funds.
Right.
Those assessments that come in are kept in that particular zone to pay for those
Right.
maintenance.
Because if you did commingle it, you'd be responsible for it.
Yes, no.
No robbing
because
Peter to pay Paul.
Zones have different relative benefits.
So we
Okay.
leave 3 and 4 alone, right? Commission?
Yeah,
Leave
I don't
3
see
and
a
4
need to
alone?
change.
But remember, this is general plan, so it's primarily for our use, so I don't, as long as we're clear on what we're doing, that's the
Yeah,
main thing.
that way when your reports
Yeah,
come.
right.
Okay, and so 2, public services and facilities goals. What was your point there?
Well, I wanted to point out that it says some are discouraged as part of the new developments or renovations, and yet we're talking about sumps, park sumps. So it's kind of strange language a little bit. See, it says we're discouraging sumps, but it's saying we want park sumps.
Well,
I think what it
There's a
means-
difference between the one behind Home Depot
Right.
and something else. But
Right.
on the same token, just bring it to the commission. We have this resolution coming back because we didn't meet the public notice on the tentative plat map up in College Heights. And they're having to design retention because the other subdivisions didn't.
Right.
And so now we end up with a volume problem, and I'm not sure that you can take the acreage and solve the volume problem, and that's why I brought up to Lauren, what's our hydrological report showing, what is the need? Because I can't say, well, we want a sump or we want pocket park if we don't know exactly how much we're trying to retain.
Well, and I had a problem because it talks about detention facilities in this particular item, and then it says sumps are discouraged as part of new development. What would you use different, Warren, than a sump for retention?
Yeah, it's, I think they're trying to distinguish, as the commissioners indicated.
This kind of sump.
Distinguishment between a Home Depot type sump
Right.
versus something that.
A recreational facility.
Right. I think
That-
that's the distinction.
Well, I agree. I just think the language is.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point, it wasn't really to try to have the planning commission go
Talk
through
to
these.
Keith O'Meara about
Yeah.
the language, will you?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, good. We'll be here for a while. Is just to give you an idea of the kinds of things we could get involved with when we get into the general plan update. I'd like to point out that from a staff standpoint, we're kind of doing this backwards. The intent of the city, and it's in the budget, whether it stays in the budget, I don't know, is to do a code codification, meaning we go through the municipal code and we make changes and modify. It's the way in which you go about modifying the entire municipal code. You do a code codification. And we're going to hire a consultant to help us put that language together, assuming the budget stays in place. If that happens, then we would focus on these code changes and get those cleaned up. And then what I would recommend as staff, and I think Lauren would do, is then we would modify the general plan to kind of make sure it matches to the code that we've just redone, so that they match up, so we don't have this conflict that we see a lot on a staff level where the municipal code says one thing and actually the general plan says something else. And so, we could strengthen the general plan by it matching to a great extent the code, or getting the code to match the general plan, depending on how you want to look at it. But
I think it should go the other way, if anything. The code should be updated to match the general plan.
Right. And so what I'm saying is that code needs to get changed as well. And it's going to be done if it stays in the budget, it'll be there. So what I'm saying to you is you might want to look at this project as a project, but maybe doing it in a couple of 3 months after we know whether the code's it's going to stay in the budget and we're going to have that code codification happen. Then you'd have not knowing going on. If we start digging into the general plan and we don't know whether the code's going to change or not yet, until we find out whether the council wants to approve that codification expenditure. So just a comment we have, a recommendation.
So right now, just look at it on a case-by-case basis?
Right, as it comes up.
Okay. So item 10, commissioner items and comments, committee reports. Mr. Ferris?
Economic Development Committee has met and discussed a couple different options, and working with Gary and pursuing some of those, talked about ICSC. Quality of Life Committee has also met, and we discussed the new park proposals, and City Council approved that new process and funded or released funding for the new equipment in the park. So
thank you.
That's it.
Mr. Sanders?
We'll just have infrastructure meeting Thursday at 5. I haven't looked over the agenda yet. Do you happen to know off the top of your head what we're going to be discussing?
Not off the top of my head, but I've read it.
Yeah. So if you're for the community's benefit as well, for everyone listening, it's at 5 o'clock here.
We'll report next month.
Yeah.
Cecil?
We had city org, and we didn't get through the whole agenda. A big portion of it was hearing out. Yeah, they're trying to go through the definitions of what defines a city council meeting and how to carry that meeting out. Another thing we talked about was Justin O'Neill, which I am supremely shocked that the city org is responsible for approving his budget and his submittals. That just blew me out of the water because I didn't know we were tasked with that. I thought there should have been something that city council approves, since he works for city council.
His budget should be
so does the finance
approved
committee.
by the city council, but it's
right.
Like all the tasking.
He's bringing his task orders and what he's
his
done.
reports go to you guys. Yeah.
But I feel uncomfortable because I have no idea of. It's just a piece of paper with everything he's done. I don't know what he's done.
That's one thing I didn't.
It's like. Weird. It's very uncomfortable.
Well, I just as a personal comment, and I haven't been. Well, I take that back. I was to one of them, and I filled in for somebody that wasn't there. I forget who it was, but is that when you look at items like this, you have to decide. And I look at the city council the same way. This is what we're spending. What are we getting for it? So somebody can say, I'm doing this and this and this and this and this and this and this, but how did it benefit the city? Did it truly benefit the city? You know, is he the right fit?
Well,
Is he,
not only that, but did you
He's
do
not
this,
living
this, and
here
this,
any
and this?
longer.
Yeah.
isn't he?
He lives in San Diego, I think. Huh?
Yes, he doesn't live here. So
I didn't say.
I don't know.
He is a very unique employee or contractor or whatever you want to call him within the city. I think he's the only, and I could be stand corrected, but I think he's the only one that
That is a
actually
one-of-a-kind contract.
that actually
Yeah,
has that unique situation. Yeah,
It's
very unusual.
I just felt very uncomfortable. So
Same, I
But
agree.
you're a smart man. You know, you have a life experience that somebody else doesn't have. Even the city council, they're not professional engineers or something else. And so, you know, is he doing the job or isn't he? You know, you can make a decision. Same thing that a department head has to do on base. Same thing that a business owner has to do out here. Decide whether or not what we're paying them, we're getting our dollar's worth. And use your common sense and your life experience to say, nah, I wouldn't hire him. Or, yeah, I think he's doing a good job. Or,
no, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying.
okay.
But nonetheless, it's a sheet of paper and you approve it. I don't know if it's. I
Is
can
there
make
a
that
written
But
up.
is it a
that.
rubber stamp? Are they asking for a rubber stamp of whatever's on that piece of paper?
It's kind of like I had a meeting. I met with Councilman Smith for 2 hours to discuss XYZ.
Well, there's no way to verify that.
Not without talking to Councilman Smith. I would have to personally talk to Councilman Smith to feel good about saying you did that.
To what end? You know, is where I would go. I talked to Councilman Smith about the casino. To what end? So what was the conclusion? Tell me what the conclusion was. You know, maybe
Anyway,
a piece of paper,
we
but
can
you have the
discuss
right
in
to
that.
ask questions.
We can discuss in that meeting.
I know.
Can I ask with the city org committee, are you guys still discussing the rules for
So get over
council,
with this, right?
Yes.
council meetings?
I mean, we are done with that,
Yes.
I think we
You're done
finalized
with
that.
that? And that's going to the
It's
city
coming-
council
it's
soon?
coming to this council.
Did we finish that?
Okay,
I think we did, yeah.
okay.
Okay, Mr. Rajaratnam.
Same.
Same, ditto.
Yeah.
Okay, and mine's ditto to Commissioner Sanders. We have Infrastructure Committee on Thursday, and we could take the time and ask Lauren what it was, but we'll give a report after it's over, because we're running late. Commissioner comments. Any comments from Mr. Ferris?
Nothing for me.
Sanders?
I just have the one that we kind of got I don't know where my notepad is now. Anyways, we kind of got an idea of one thing we may want to look into in terms of recommendations to the City Council for municipal code changes. And this is something I don't understand very well, but it was brought up, and this isn't the first time I've heard it, and that's why I kind of want to look into that. But Mr. Witten said that the municipal code requires site plan approval to get a map approval. And I don't know how other cities do it. I'd be interested to kind of get staff to kind of look into that if we have time to see what other cities in Kern County are doing, what's working well, what isn't, and maybe there's something we need to change to make this a little more developer friendly. I don't want to sell the farm by doing something that's going to give up the city's right to protect itself, but I think that would be worth looking into. So that's all I have.
Mr. Yates?
I just have one question.
I didn't do it. Mr.
You
Yates
didn't do
did.
it? No, that's okay. We discussed Starbucks going into Pizza Hut sometime back, so anything happened after that? Or?
Staff? What's happened with the Pizza Hut deal?
We refuse to comment on the basis that it'll impeach us. No, the answer is that Starbucks has an application currently at another location. I mean, not Starbucks. Pizza Hut has has identified another location. That well, I wasn't going to say that
I know
because
that
that was
anyway.
relieving. information
Yeah,
that's not
but
public yet.
I thought
But
Starbucks was
someplace
going into the
out there.
old- Starbucks was going to go into the old Pizza Hut location. Where is that sitting? is
Yeah,
what
where
he's
is that's
asking.
what I'm.
Oh, well, Pizza Hut's looking for another location. Is that?
So unless Pizza Hut moves, Starbucks cannot do anything.
That's kind of true because Pizza Hut's
okay.
there.
Okay.
So
Okay, thank you, sir.
you're welcome.
That answers it. The only comment that I have, Commissioners, thanks for your hard work tonight. I was grateful for staff, all of the staff. This was a hard thing. There was a lot of moving parts, as our engineer and our planner said. And so consequently, to be able to hammer something out without just saying yes or no, and so that's one of the reasons why I say concerns and not, no. But I am grateful for the Commission's work tonight. And I know it was long hours because these last few have been longer than most of them that we've had. But we've had not some real easy, not so easy with them. So I appreciate all of you. Future agenda items. Any of you have any future agenda items that you'd specifically like to address? Mr. Sanders talked about he would like to have some feedback on that. I too, I would not like to have Darrell come in and beat us over the head and say other cities don't do, when we could actually say, no, that's not true, or yes, we're going to address that. And so I think it would be beneficial for us to look into that. Any other items that you would? So, and I think the recommendation from our planner on holding off would be appropriate. So I'm grateful for everybody's service tonight. Staff items?
Just a couple. First of all, just to let you know, the Planning Commission know that we are going through budget process. The staff is at this level in preparation for giving it to council. So Planning Commission budget's in part of that budget. So if you have a specific desire or something you feel needs to be budgeted, you need to get it to staff pretty quickly because the budget's beginning to look like this. And so you won't have access to a lot of funds to operate with. So
Okay, we gave up our magazine.
Oh, you're going to give up more than that if it keeps going. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, tell me we want to raise.
You got it. You got it.
No, I'm just joking.
Mr. Former Councilman, you got it. Didn't get a raise during the time when you were running for council. But anyway, you were in council. Other than that, we want to thank the council. The Planning Commission. It's been a very difficult process, and frankly, I think it's a very good thing to have modifications to resolutions. Thank you. That are modified during meetings, because I think it allows for that discussion, gives you the best possible resolution. You just had to be careful that she gets them all changed, which is what you were doing, and we appreciate that very much. Staff does not look at changing our resolutions that we're proposing to you as a bad thing. We think that's a good thing, and so we appreciate that.
I would concur with that. The ability to work together. This is the only time all five of us can talk with the Brown Act, and to work with staff, and to work back and forth with staff, and then hold his feet to the coals and say, you approve all of these, right? So I'm grateful to all of you. Lauren, any staff? Paul?
Just thanks for enduring through that, and I hope you have some insight what we have to go through in evaluating the general plan, the city's municipal code, and coming up with conditions on projects. It's an arduous project, and I appreciate the fact that you endured that. And I look at it as if it's the collective intellect that's looking at what we have in black and white and coming up with a solution for those issues that would just seem like they're heavy-handed.
Yes.
And so I thank you for that.
Our municipal code dates back to 1964, I believe.
86.
Was it 86 last time? It was a modification. 86. So we're working with a slightly old code. So.
Well, and the general plan was done in 08, wasn't it?
Yes.
All right. So with that, we'll adjourn this evening at 9:32.